We will call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. And before we start, it is 9/11, so we do want to take a moment to honor that day 22 years ago. So let's take that moment of silence now. Thank you. Thank you, folks. All right, let's start with the board norms. Start to maintain our focus, communicate respectfully, be present, keep the board productive and effective, and respect the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, I just have a quick presentation that'll be during my super report.
Okay, presentation. Anything else, folks? All right, seeing none, we will move into the student report.
Thank you. We started off the year great. I think our sports teams are really starting to get on their feet. Our middle school, I believe, has their first games tomorrow. And there is a varsity girls game tomorrow at home. All those games are at home. The varsity boys are starting to get on their feet. We had 2 canceled games last week, which kind of sucks. We were inside a lot of the week from the heat index, so hard to practice, hard to get things together. We today picked our PBLs for this first semester, and there were some pretty good options. There was one about making food that is only sourced from Vermont. There was some passion projects. There's working on Journey Away. I think that's all, and I'm going to move into my presentation now. I'm going to call Theo up to help me with that.
Trevor, sorry, before you start, do you have something near you? You have a mic nearby?
I mean, the mics are around the room, so it'll be picked up.
Okay. Thank you.
I just need
Sure, where are we going for this?
right there.
Right here?
Theo, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hey, I'm Theo Kellaway. I'm captain of the soccer team. I'm a member of NHS and a proud Leland Gray student.
So that's all.
I'm also a senior. We're here today because we want to talk about visiting the cemeteries before some of our games. This was before our last game that we went to the cemetery for. It was a note from Dylan Lander's mother, who was the mother of the kid that passed and whose grave we visit before every game we have. And she does that before every game we go to. She will leave a note for us at the cemetery with something for us. It's usually a kind, positive note to encourage us. Trevor?
So the people who visit. So as a team, this is an optional thing. We definitely do not require people to go. If they want to go, we say you can go. And it's mostly upperclassmen at this point. As most of you probably know, Dylan would have graduated last year. We have 9 people on our team that are seniors this year and actually played on a sports team with Dylan. And since we have a lot of seniors that are going, a lot of people have a free D block, and this doesn't actually affect them, so we're really only asking for 7 people to miss class time.
What happens when we can't go? Because this was a big problem the last couple of years when there wasn't clear enough communication on when we left to go to visit the cemetery or how we would get there. A lot of the times, students didn't know they weren't allowed to go because we thought we could go. And so they would walk out of the class to then get chased down by a teacher or something else. And it was really disruptive, I'll be honest. I was probably one of those kids that ended up disrupting those classes on accident, but it was a problem because we found that out in those years that when there wasn't clear, decisive communication and direction on what we were doing, it didn't go well. And a lot of class time was messed up, missed, and lost. And that's why we want to change this. And the kids, because if we allow the kids to do this, they will be able to quickly and quietly leave the classroom without disrupting anyone. And if we don't allow them to do that, as we know from previous years, it doesn't go too smoothly. It'll also help the play of the games for the students because we'll have this ritual that we do. And it will help us be able to get our minds ready for the game and be able to concentrate on it better.
So I looked into our schedule for this season, and going to the cemetery really only takes away from class time in 3 away games, because this only affects away games, because when we're at home, we go right after school, but for an away game, we obviously leave early. So what we're doing is asking for 15 minutes for us to go to the cemetery, come back, get ready, and get on the bus. So this is in total 45 minutes for this entire season. And we're at school this year for 45,600 minutes. This is 0.05% of the time we're spending at school. I just think it's a very small amount of time, and it's huge for these players and Dylan's family. I put some other numbers together. Passing period here at school takes up 22 minutes a day, which equates to 5.2% of our time that we spend here at school, which a lot of the students, including probably me and Theo, we take laps, we walk in circles. I mean,
Something to do.
80% of us probably walk in circles during passing period. We spend 8 minutes a day in our attendance in the morning, where we take attendance and we watch the morning announcements. So that's 2% of our time we spend here at school. 5% and 2% is a lot more than 0.05.
Flex. We have something in place for students that miss class time. It's an amazing opportunity the school has given us. It should be used more efficiently by students. And this is where we make up those 15 minutes. Because those 15 minutes that happen 3 times can be made up every day in Flex. Because we have Flex every single school day. Flex is 30 minutes for students to go to whatever class they choose to make up work they missed. And students who are doing this should use the time effectively to schedule in flex times for the classes they miss, so they're able to make up that work that they might have missed in those 15 minutes. When will this end? I know a lot of you are tired of hearing this because I feel like it's happened every year since it happened. And I believe this should end when there is a group of students that are not willing and didn't care for Dylan enough to go up here and fight for him and fight to go visit him before every game.
So we're not sure if this is a board decision or how it really works, but we just would really like you guys to reconsider, and because I think this is huge to the student body and huge to the community. All we're asking is for you guys to reconsider for 45 minutes. That's all we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, I guess, so probably a lot of people don't really understand what they're talking about. But it's just to give a little bit of a context. And a clarifying question to you guys. You guys are asking the board to reconsider what?
So what we were told, me and Theo on the first day of school, we met with Mr. Quadro. We were like, this is something we've been doing. We just want to get right on it. We want to ask ahead of time. And he's like, yes, we got to talk about this. We got to get this set. And then we went to him on the day of our first game, and we were like, so we're just making sure we're allowed to do this. And he's like, well, I talked about it. I went and I talked to Mr. Tebow, and basically what he told us is we have decided that this is we don't want you guys missing class time. We don't want the academics to be missed out of. That's what I was told by Mr. Quadro. And Theo can vouch for me on that.
I can attest to that. We were told that he doesn't want us to leave, or he was not permitted to have students leave during school time before dismissal.
So you're asking the board to overrule what the conversation that you had with Mr. Quadro, is in short what you're asking for.
Well, I don't know if this is a board decision or not. I just
That's what I'm trying to figure out. What, so you
get
got an answer from the principal that you now want to get another
yes.
review on. Okay. So I have not met with these guys, and Mr. Quadro was on the call. I don't know how you guys want to do it, but I don't know if Mr. Quadro wants to respond a little bit, or if the board just wants to kick it back to the building / superintendent level. It's really up to you guys what you want to do. You would need a lot more information, I think, before you would make decisions about this, because there's a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about in depth. I mean, I think they've explained, for me, who knows what they're talking about, they've explained it really well, and obviously done a really nice job, and with some good data to support it, and really done eloquently, and with great articulation. But it's a complex thing, and so I don't know. It's really up to you what you want to do. If you want to have Dana respond, or you want to, Dana might have something to say.
I think that's
He is on.
fair.
He is on
If
Zoom.
Dana's on to, yeah.
See him.
Thank you.
Now we figured.
Am I okay to speak?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So the gentlemen are correct. We met and we talked about some ways to move forward. And I was pretty open with them that this is a new situation for me too. I was new last year, and my understanding is after some consult with grief experts and whatnot, a plan was put together, and I am not sure how it was communicated with the students. I'm not sure if the students were present when this was processed. I will say this, these young men have conducted themselves perfectly. Whenever I've met with them, I've had an email from a student, and I had a third young man come see me this afternoon. And again, they've all conducted themselves really well. I don't have the answers for all of this. I do know that I expect our students to be safe, and I expect them to be kind, and we need to take care of their well-being, and learning is a priority. Some of the details that they shared in their presentation, I didn't have the numbers. So I didn't have the numbers either. So having the conversation is good, but I do know from their perspective, they have away games coming up, and they want to be able to honor their friend and participate in the games. I even was thinking about this. I'm like, are they being defiant by just going ahead and doing this? And I would suggest that they are not. On the first day of school, and they can speak to this. I gave the high school students a directive around profanity in school. I gave them a directive around no cell phones in class. And the high school student body in general has done really well with this. I think I have heard profanity twice in our school year so far, and that's can be improved, but I will tell you, our student body has done really well with following these expectations. And I have heard, I think, one discipline referral for phone use in class. So I don't think these young men are being defiant. I think this is an aspect of grief, and I think they want their voice heard. And I think that we build better communities by making sure that everybody's voice is heard. I would suggest that we need to sit down at a table and be clear, to work through a shared agreement that we can all come together and embrace. I'm not a grief expert, but I know we have students that are still in pain and they deserve our support. And on the other side of that, I am very concerned about their learning. But that being said, again, I've given them two big asks this year that involve habits, and they've really grappled with them and done well with them. So I am certainly open to sitting down with the students involved. Maybe we need to get an expert in to help guide all of us in terms of how to proceed in a respectful way that will bring some resolution and healing. I'm certainly open to suggestions, but I do enjoy working with these students. They've conducted themselves well, so I thank them for that.
Thank you, Dan.
So I'm going to suggest 3 possible paths forward, and maybe there's others you guys can add to this. One of them, it sounds like there's an offer on the table for Mr. Claudio to reconnect in some way and with the kids and see where that conversation goes. The next step, the other step would be sort of like putting it back to the building level. If the students feel like they've had that conversation and are still dissatisfied, then the board can direct them to meet with me, which would be the chain of command next step. After which time, then they would bring a complaint to the board. That would follow the chain of command stuff. So you could step over the chain of command and make a decision now. It's option 1. You can push it back to have them come back to see me if they're not satisfied with the earlier conversation with Dana. Or it sounds like Dana's offering to welcome them back in for a round 2 or 3. I'm not sure how they feel about that, but it sounds like Dana's willing to re-engage them in that conversation as well. So it sounds like those might be some options, and maybe others, I don't know, but that's what jumps out at me.
Okay. Sure.
I believe if you push it back to building level and then we go through the whole chain of command again. I mean, we have board meetings once a month. If we are dissatisfied and we have to come back to the board, we're halfway through soccer season or more, and we just missed the opportunity to go to so many games. I don't know. Chris, that really pushes it out.
I just want to say, as a parent who lost a child, the fact that these kids, they carry his memory. They go to him before soccer, baseball. It gives them a little something. They feel like they play better. I know how helpful it is to the family. I understand getting to a point that you have to kind of move on with life. My opinion is these guys are going to be probably the last group of kids to do this. So no matter who makes the decision, I really hope we do it quickly.
I just want to speak a little bit to the chain of command discussion, because I disagree with the idea that a student board member can't bring an issue directly to the board. We set up this environment where we've asked for student representation, and so I don't think there's an overstep. I think we have intentionally, as a board, encouraged our students to come, and certainly our student board members to come and bring issues directly to the board. And as Trevor said, there's certainly a time and urgency discussion here that if it was kicked back to the administration and there was some feet dragging, it would send a message to the student body. We have as a board, said that, you know, we are student-centered. The reason why we have student board members is because we want to hear student voice. We want students to come, and I thank you for coming and speaking to the board. So I would just caution our administration to consider the values of the district and the board, which are the students. I would hate to find out that, you know, we're not, if the board decides not to make a decision, that the 3 games they're asking about go by before the meeting. And I've seen that tactic and approach by school administration in the past, the stall and delay tactic. And I'm not accusing this particular administration, but I can see that being the outcome of this conversation, and a whole bunch of pissed off students 7 days into class. I can almost guarantee that profanities will increase and cell phone use will shortly after that respect has been destroyed. So I guess that's where I'm at. I think I'm glad to hear student input, and I would encourage the students to bring issues to the board, even if it means that, you know, there's this perceived chain of command gap.
Thanks, Drew. Sorry, before I jump to you, just wanted to ask, do we know when those 3 games are? Just
I just looked really quick, and it looks like Tuesday, the 19th, is their first away game that it would apply to, because there's one before that, but it's a night game.
Yes.
So that,
Most of them that we might have to miss are around 4 or 4:30 start times.
right.
Any of the 6 o'clock start times. Because I think it's in like 2 weeks or something.
It looked like Tuesday the 19th was, let me look again, Tuesday the 19th.
No, that's home.
Oh,
Home games are
okay.
fine for it because we can leave directly after school ends.
Oh, you're right, it is. Yeah, I'm not positive on that.
All right, sorry. So I've got Lindsay.
I was just answering that.
And I'm sorry. You.
I believe the 22nd is the first scheduled one, and the 2 that were canceled last week are the other 2 away games, so we won't know when they
I
are
think
yet.
Springfield might be.
It might be rescheduled.
Yeah.
Of course, I should know this.
Right.
So I just would like to say that I guess I also am feeling their sense of urgency with time is of the essence, and we only meet once a month, and had I been in their position, I probably would have gone straight to the board with a here's where we're at as well. And I guess I just want to really acknowledge that we are a very tight-knit community, and that I think that it's this particular thing will affect more than just these players that are asking to go. I think it will affect the entire student body who is also feeling this grief, and I think it will affect the family, and I think it will affect the entire community that understands that this was and still is a really big thing, and worthy of the gravity that they're giving it. So the only other comment I have about, I understand the importance of their class time and their grades. However, there's also a requirement that all student athletes are required to maintain a certain level of their academics in order to play. And so I really hope that one way or another that something can happen quickly here.
Got Leanne, and then I think Dana, you were next, and then.
I just wanted to speak from a, well, it's been many years now, student point of view as far as memories go. It creates a huge impact on the student body when one of the classmates dies, whether you see it coming or not. And that really sticks with people for a really long time. A lot of these students, because we are so small and such a small community, they probably were going to school, since elementary school with this same student. And I think if there's a way that we can make this happen, echoing Lindsay, as long as we're not having huge grade slides and they're meeting all the other requirements for playing sports, I would urge probably that we may want to consider this given the timing.
Thank you. Dana, Theo, and then
I have 2 points. One, I do not want to undermine the authority of our principal by overriding his decisions. We gave him the power to make policy and decisions. I was hoping you guys would settle this without having to come to the board with it. I mean, we like to know about these things, but if we're constantly micromanaging the situation, it would be nice if two parties could come together. Because I also understand that Dylan played basketball and baseball, so this would repeat itself, definitely in the spring, and more likely in the winter you'd want to go over to the cemetery in daylight, not at nighttime. So, I mean, I don't want to undermine our principal's authority. I mean, if you guys have respect for him, and you guys can come to a understanding, a compromise of some sort, I'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Theo, and then Emma.
I have 2 points. I want to respond to what you said, but
Please.
A second ago, you guys were talking about grades, and we have to make sure students have their grades up, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's why one of the things we already have in place, if I'm not mistaken, is students have to be above that passing mark to travel to those away games. So they would already have to be past what we deemed as a passing and eligible credit of a grade to even go to the games. And so we only go to the cemetery before games, so they would just stay in school because they wouldn't go to any of those away games. And to your point, is I would love to sit down with Dana and really work this out if we could get it done in a timely enough fashion. And I think it should be something that we should do, because I have respect for Dana, I have respect for this whole administration. I think we've done a great job putting it together. When we started this in the very beginning, before the school year started, I was under the impression that we were still going to be allowed to do this. And that kind of caught me off guard when I first saw it. I know a lot of you probably saw it coming, but I hadn't been to those meetings about where like he graduated, so it should be over. And so it kind of caught me off guard, and I wish I might have been to those so we could have solved it before the school year started. But yeah, if we could get it solved in the most timely fashion, that would be best, because I pride myself in being a Leland Gray student, and I think every student should have above passing grade. We shouldn't be scraping by. Our school should be excelling. I don't think there should be a reason we shouldn't be. We have all the tools in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thanks. First, I want to say thank you to the students for coming to us like this. I echoing what Drew said. Many years ago, I was championing bringing student board members to Leland Gray, and we were one of the first schools to do it. Early schools in the state to do it, and this is why. And thank you for feeling comfortable coming to the board, because that's what you did, and that's a great path for you, just like anyone else. I am, as Dana mentioned, very cautious about stepping out of our role and into the role of administration. So I would caution us on that. The one thing that sticks with me that I heard from Dana was that there was information that these gentlemen shared tonight that he was unaware of. And it feels to me like there is more conversation to be had at the school level, and I am disappointed that didn't happen prior to this meeting, but I think there's plenty of time before the next game where this would impact to have that happen. And I would strongly encourage the administration to address this as quickly as possible. And if they can't come to a resolution to go through the process, and if we have to hold another meeting for it, then we'll do it. But there's time to do that, and I would hope that the administration will take this seriously and meet with the students again to get the full information so that they are making a decision based on all the facts. Thanks.
Thanks. Sure.
I think the reason that me and Theo came here today to the board is the fact that we were caught off guard, and then it was literally last Friday that we were talking about this. And I was like, well, there's a board meeting Monday if we want to bring it all the way to that level, but And if we don't bring it all the way to that level at that point, we're still disappointed down the road, then we're waiting a month. And then, so that's, I think, why we jumped up here. I tried to meet with Dana this afternoon I was trying to give him some of the details. I was trying to tell him, I'm presenting this tonight, this is what's happening. But I mean, he's a principal, he's busy. That's how it works. I only have one free block. He only has a certain amount of time, but yeah.
And I just wanted to add that, you know, if they're leaving during the school day, I think we could ask the parents or draw up a permission slip that kind of takes the responsibility off the school.
Oh, go ahead. And what I'm hearing from the board members of the room is there's a consensus that we feel that this is important for the student body. And we also feel like it probably can be handled by the administration. I don't know that the board needs to dictate to the administration how, but I think we could certainly, I think the administration probably is feeling the same thing that I am in the room, which is I think you're capable of managing it. I think you can meet with the students, and I think the board wants you to do that pretty darn quick so that we don't have, you know, the students don't miss this opportunity. I'm certain that Dana's on it. I'm assuming he would be willing to meet with and address the students' concerns, you know, soon. And I guess if it doesn't, then we always have the option of a special board meeting or or something. Or the students can just walk out of class like they were doing last year.
No. Sorry.
I don't know if I agree with that.
We have permission last year.
Yeah.
We're not just walking out of class. We're allowed to.
Yeah, it's throwing me under the bus.
Yeah, wow. But I will say, not me and Theo, but there is definitely some seniors that if you hold this off too long, they are just gonna leave. They are going to leave. I shouldn't speak for them, but that is what is going to happen. And you're gonna get a lot of kickback from them. A ton of kickback from them. And if you really want them to focus in class, I don't think them walking out is gonna help you.
I don't think this is a 45-minute hill that the administration wants to die on.
I agree.
I was gonna add, I think that there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of other information that's part of this. This is not a simple conversation. It's a complex problem. And, you know, going through having a school year where a student passes away is the hardest thing you'll do as an administrator. Like, it really is. And for so many reasons. And like, especially when it's someone who's been in the community a long time. I mean, his dad was a student of mine. This is not an easy thing. And we as a school, you know, obviously was principal at the time, may have made mistakes along the way. We did the best we could. We sought out professional advice on things that we should do. There's guidelines that are issued for these situations. Everything's a little bit different, of course, but we did our best to follow what we thought was the right way to go about this. And I heard Dana say initially was that he would like another shot at this, is what I heard him say, not in those exact words. And I think, I would agree with Dana, I think it's dangerous for the board to do anything other than allow that to happen, for so many reasons. And it's got nothing to do with these guys. These guys did a fantastic job, and they're, I think, articulating what Trevor's pointing out now is they're speaking for a group that wouldn't come to a board meeting necessarily. And if they did, they wouldn't necessarily be as articulate as these two guys have been. So I want to praise them for that, but they're standing up for their fellow students, which is an important thing that we ought to recognize. And I think it's a dangerous territory. I think the answer is thank you. We appreciate the presentation, Dana, we're gonna take you up on your offer to revisit with these guys. And I think that's no board action required, be my suggestion. But Dana and I had a talk this afternoon, when we heard there might be something happening at the meeting tonight. And he's got a plan, I think, in place, which feels solid to me. He just wanted the opportunity to share the potential to bring it back to his level. And I think that's where you're gonna get the biggest bang for your buck. And where these guys are gonna be able to see their voices heard by an administrator in the building that cares about them. So that's my 2 cents.
You keep saying that it's complex and there's other information. Can the students be made aware of the other information?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dana's plan may bring you guys in the loop on other information.
Right.
So it's just not something I want to put up in that board meeting, you know what I'm saying?
I think that may be part of the challenge now. And you understand that the administration makes decisions, and sometimes they don't include the student body in those decisions. So there was a practice in place, and that decision was made to change that practice without student involvement. And I think what you're seeing now is the students wondering why that change was made. They weren't involved in that change. There's an expectation that they were going to continue the practice that they have been at. So back to what we've been preaching to ourselves, and certainly trying to guide the school system, is engaging our students and making sure that they're part of that process. And it sounds like Dana is now willing to invite these students in and be part of that process. And I think that's probably the best possible outcome that we could ask for, is to let the students be heard by their administration. And I'm certain if they don't feel heard, we will hear about it.
Yeah, well, so true. I mean, I think we're all learning, right? I think about this, these are not things that you go through often, thankfully.
Right.
So.
And it's next to impossible to navigate a situation this awful in a way that everybody at the end feels like it was perfectly handled. So that's the other part of this too. And I'm not being defensive about how it was handled either, because like I said, I think mistakes I'm sure were made. It's such a hard thing. And so, yeah. And it's not something that we're trained in as educators. So it's just one of those things. They don't cover it in principal school.
You can make a lot, put the program together.
It's not something you really want to be out there selling, but yeah, no, there's resources out there. The state provides resources, and the Counseling Association provides resources, and there's a grief expert in the region could provide. I mean, there's resources out there that we utilize, and other schools who have been through it and recently, and yeah, you kind of talk with each other, and you do the best you can to manage it.
This is a great discussion, and I really don't want to close it off, but I just want to say, unless anybody has something to add in terms of. Yeah, right, I know it, but if we're just continuing the same conversation.
Sounds like Dana does have his hand up too. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like we could thread the needle by, as many have said, letting this go back to the administration. The next game is the 22nd. I'm sure this conversation is going to happen well before that.
I'm just wondering is it possible to give our students should they not be able to come to some agreement, I find this highly unlikely, but should they not be able to come to some agreement, being that we will not have another board meeting before that happens, can we at least give our students some semblance of, we've heard you and we will agree to have a special meeting or something if something doesn't get worked out. It seems wildly unlikely that that is the case, but I would like to be able to just give them the reassurance of knowing that they won't be.
Right, and I think
separated.
everybody's much stated that, and we can call a special meeting at any time. I would agree. But yes, would love to have the administration handle this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just want to get this really quickly in. Is I keep hearing talk about bringing in these grief counselors or these grief strategies that are at our school. And I've been a student here since the 7th grade, and I don't think I've seen any of that. Even after Dylan passed, I don't remember seeing anything helping us with grief. I don't remember anyone reaching out with grief counselors. This was our one way we could get out of our grief. I never saw a grief counselor I never heard of a grief counselor coming to Leland Gray, or it was not available to us, or I don't know what. I never heard any way for us to deal with our grief other than to go visit Dylan at the cemetery. I didn't see anything. I don't know if we even have anything in place right now, because I haven't seen it, and I'm a senior here. I think that's messed up. That's all I gotta say.
Thanks, Leah. Okay. And again, thank you for sharing. It's, did you have something there?
Yes, yeah. On that topic, I was a student here. I just graduated last year. And while a grief counselor by name may not have been provided, I do want to say that administration and the school counselors did make it clear that resources could be available. But again, no one was specifically named. But after the incident, there was talk. Administration did at least point students towards the school counselors, such as Sarah Grosso. So I do want to say that I was a student at the time. I remember that.
Thanks, Steve. Okay. If there's nothing else, we again appreciate it, and yeah, we would like to let the administration handle this with you folks. And I'm sure that does not come to a resolution. We will hear about it. So, all right. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Moving on to correspondence. Any correspondence? Okay. Moving on to old business. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of August 14th.
So moved.
Here, and a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Dana. Any discussion? Seeing none. Do we have any folks out there? Sorry, I cannot see.
So I'm gonna throw out a little loophole here. I don't think you have minutes.
I was gonna say, because, yeah.
It's great that we want to approve them, but I don't think we ever received them.
Actually, I don't know.
They're not in the
No,
packet.
They're not in the packet. They
Sue
weren't.
told me today that we never received them. She's reached out to Meredith to find out why. They're supposed to be posted as in draft form 5 days after the meeting. We didn't get them. So do not motion to approve them.
I retract my motion.
Thank you. Did you retract your seconds?
This has been a test.
Had there been real minutes.
Sorry. So yeah, we will get that for next time.
Okay.
I mean, we hope to anyways, I assume.
We need to get them posted.
Yeah, they're supposed to be posted 5 days after the meeting happens in draft form, so.
It's a learning process.
All right, yes. We're continuing to work, yes.
Next.
Yeah, right. All right, financials. Who has them?
I got them too.
And that wasn't a joke.
Those we got, those are reviewed.
And I
So
like the new
it's-
system.
Yeah, the new system is cool. So it's check voucher number V9011.
Yep.
And it is for $121,700.56.
I'll second that one.
Any discussion? Seeing none. I don't think we ever got to whether or not we have anybody out there. Can't read.
Just
Board members out there.
Sarah.
Oh, Sarah. Sarah. Oh, I see her. Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Sarah, did you say aye?
I don't see, I don't see.
No?
I think she told me she couldn't make it tonight.
Oh, okay. All right.
Students should birthday.
They're all in the room.
She's the one at the birthday party.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course. Yes, I have to. Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Do we have a second one?
Sorry.
I got a second one.
Oh, you do have a second one.
I
Okay.
had a second voucher. Did you have that?
Not in September. Oh, the August 25th one.
Yeah.
That would have been, shoot, no, I
I
didn't.
got that voucher.
All right.
For voucher, I propose we agree to pay voucher 8935 for $1,089, $189,663.38.
Second.
Thanks, Sheer.
That also
Discussion.
Oh.
Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Again. Leland and Gray sprinkler system. Existing conditions, site survey, existing condition floor plan. Greg?
Hey,
Hey, Greg.
can you hear me all right?
Perfect.
All right. Yeah, so this was just so when I met the last time and I met with Tim Stone, I spoke with him and he requested all of these other surveys and floor plans that that I don't have. So I reached out to Brud Sanderson from Stevens. So the path forward is we need an architect and then the designer will work under the architect. The way Kirk had made it out was that I could just move on to Tim Stone. It turns out that I can't. I still need an architect. I feel like our time with Kirk has ended, and I would like, just in like an overabundance of transparency with you all, I would like to move forward using Brud because he already has one half of this. They already have I believe it's the existing conditions. So I think that we would stand to save a little bit of money to move forward with Brud, and then Stevens and Associate would then be able to contract with Tim Stone as the designer, but it would just come through all as one project through Stevens and Associates. I just wanted to, I just didn't want you all to come at some point and say, hey, well, where did these guys come in or whatnot? So it's just kind of like I said, an overabundance of clarity with you all of where we're at with that. And I just wanted to, I don't know, I guess check with you, like, are you okay with me moving on with Stevens, or would you prefer me to continue on with Kirk, who was the engineer that was recommended to us by the lawyers? So.
What does this do to the cost of the project?
I don't think really anything. I mean, this was going to happen either way. So my goal, Drew, thinking about this and trying to figure out how we spread it out, I'm requesting a lump sum, right? If we did it all in one project. And then I'm requesting that if we did like a 5-year plan, that probably sans the gym, the other most pressing area to get dealt with is the wood shop down back below on D level there. And so what I was going to request was that year one, what we would do is tie into our existing domestic water and get sprinkler heads in there as probably, in reality, our most dangerous actual area, being the wood shop down there. And was supposed to be done as part of the 2008 project. Then year two would be putting in the tanks and then tying in all the existing heads in the building. Year three would be doing basically the gym, your largest area. I believe is how I had it. No, it was year two was tying in everything and doing the gym. Year three was doing A level. Year four was doing B, and then year five being C and the remaining of C and D level. So it would be like a 5-year spread to try to offset the costs, with basically the biggest chunk obviously coming with the tanks and the pump. But Patrick and Kirk, when we last met, they talked about there's a 2-hour, we're pretty close on having a 2-hour clearance because of the concrete floor underneath the gym floor and the numbers of egress out of the gym. So what he was saying is that we could potentially request to have less water storage than what you would need to do a gym that size, which so that was kind of my thought was like if it buys us more time to like really figure out and get approval of like how much water storage do we really need if we can meet the 2 hour requirement that Kirk worked out with Patrick. So
I guess to kind of refine that question a little bit. So we don't have the minutes, but I remember the number being like $5,000 to $8,000 for the design of the system from the last meeting. And if those numbers aren't exact, I'm sorry. But now we have to hire an architect first before we can do the design. So my question was really about the added cost of the architect on top of the design cost, because last I knew they don't work for free.
oh, they sure don't. No, neither does Kirk. Every time I turn around, that man is billing us for emails, which they should, right? I mean, it's what they do. But no, so what I'm doing is I have a meeting scheduled with Stevens and Associates for later this week, in which we're going to lay out a scope, and then they're going to send me a quote. So that was kind of my plan. I'm not 100% sure what we're looking at there. I hope it's not insanely, out of bounds kind of engineering and architectural work that needs to be done.
Well, I'll just say in the scheme of things, that's the least of your expenses, right? Is the upfront, the design we're working on, to some degree. I mean, it's when we dig into it in year 1, 2, and 3 of the actual. That's the big expense. But
I'd be shocked if $100,000 into it before you get the permit.
Could be right. But also the fact that Stevens and Associates has more intimate knowledge and has the existing plan that will bode well.
Cheaper than the alternative.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Greg. Any other questions or comments?
Okay.
Appreciate the update.
Okay.
All right. Long-term.
It says possible action. Is there something we were supposed to act on?
Give him approval.
I think it.
Well, Greg, is there an expense for this initial meeting and to get the estimate, or is this just a preliminary meeting?
No, there should not be an expense to this. I mean, this is generally just that preliminary meeting where they're talking about this is what you would want the scope to be, and then we'll go from there. I'm sure that they would then turn this around and add it to their scope.
So at some point, you're gonna have to come back to the board with an estimate that they're gonna need to act on, right?
Yeah.
But we just don't have it.
My hope is to be back to the next board meeting with something to tangibly look at and say, this is what it's going to take for us to get a legitimate spec, and in that spec, this is what it will look like.
So we don't need action at this time until we have that. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Correct. Okay. Yes, sir.
Is that an answer?
Thanks. All right, moving on to the long-term plan update. Bob, thanks for putting that together.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to capture off of the website in my memory some documents I had laying around the last 5 years of conversation, starting with the famous night in the Dutton Gym. Some may reference it, the hot, sweaty night in Dutton Gym, back in 2018. And then the steps that have been taken along the way, the plans that have been presented, the options that were discussed, and the task force and some of the board actions are in bold that actually did happen, like moving the 6th grade and voting about maintaining a K-12 system. And then the feasibility study, the results of that. And so, I had high hopes in June to really spend some time this summer with a group, because you guys had charged Bill to leave in my plate. The idea of having some sort of presentation to give you guys at the August meeting that would sort of highlight what the next steps are, and then you guys are going to take it to the community September, October, be ready for budget season with the feedback from the community. That was the plan. And I spent a lot of time looking over this and thinking about it, and talking to some board members and talking to Greg and other people. And what I was left with, it's going to sound silly, but I was left with the conclusion that the feasibility study on one campus really concluded that it wasn't feasible without spending a bunch more money. And so before we went down the road of spending a bunch more money, we have things like sprinkler systems and other things that are sort of pending and looming. And so I guess I just wanted to kind of pause, if you will, for a moment and have you guys take the opportunity to look at where you've been for the last 5 years and really think about what is it that you want to accomplish. I guess I could say that the short answer is there isn't an easy answer, right? We are in a banana-shaped district that kind of follows Route 30 with a school on one end, a school on the other end, and a school in the middle, and two schools in the middle. And there's no easy solution that isn't going to, there's no easy solution that's going to cost less or even the same, improve the structure, and by that I'm referring to the banding, which I think people have agreed that that's kind of one of the goals of the one campus model, and not piss off at least a third of your people in one way or another, or more, depending on what you're talking about. And so I guess I just felt like before we jump into something that would be politically divisive as we stroll into budget season, I wanted you guys to have the opportunity to kind of look back at and reflect on where you've been and think about what really is the next step. Is the next step pursuing a one campus model? Is the next step pursuing 2 campus, 3 campus status quo? Are we talking about simultaneous conversation about the next 75 years? And I mention that because we've all seen our cars destroyed by Route 30 construction, and it struck me one day as I was sitting behind one of those little automated things that they could have just paved the road. The road needed to get paved, right? They could have just paved the road. And that would have solved things for the next 5 years probably, right? But it isn't what they did. What they did is they tore it down to the foundation, right? And they graded it. Now they're on the multiple layers and doing all the drainage and the rocks. Like, they're thinking the next 20 to 30 years, I'm guessing. Like, I don't work for the Department of Transportation, but that's my guess. They're not looking short term, they're looking long term. And the reason they're looking long term is sometimes long term thinking is a better investment than short term thinking. With that in my head, I just thought we should pause and think about what should be next. So my hope was that we would have the opportunity to put together a long-term planning committee. So it's not the full board having that conversation to like hash that out and talk about that. Maybe bring something back to the full board that's like, all right, we reviewed this document and we think that the next step is whatever, or these 3 steps, or whatever we felt like should happen. And then the summer happened, and there was flooding and whatever, and so people weren't available to connect and meet, and I was crazy busy dealing with my new job and everything else that comes with that. So here we are, it's now September, and we haven't moved. We're getting perilously close to budget season again without having made any movement. And I guess I'm looking for guidance from you guys as to what makes the most sense at this point. What seems logical? Are we repaving or are we tearing the foundation? Are we doing both simultaneously? I think in this conglomeration of ideas, there's probably a good short-term solution we come up with that might not cost more, that might end up being educationally better sound for a short term. And yeah, I don't know. So anyways, that's my sales pitch. I'll let you guys figure out what you want to do. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but that's kind of what my head was. It was really the little like arm sitting there in the red light thinking like, this is what they're doing. Route 9 did the same thing the year before, right? They're thinking longer term. So
It's a great analogy.
Well, we've been living it, so I figured you guys would appreciate it.
So not like ours, if I did, yeah.
It's because it's the same size as the pothole, that's why.
Yeah, right. Just gets sucked in, yeah. That's what?
I can just add one thing. I guess I was gonna say, if there was an easy answer, we would have already found it.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Very cool.
I just feel wildly disappointed that no progress was made and that nothing was brought to the board sooner for this discussion to be had until it's obviously too late for budget season. And I think that it's really irresponsible of us to continue kicking the can. And I mean, that's the same thing that we say every time, that it's not the responsible choice to keep kicking the can. And, you know, yes, let's have another conversation, right? Should we hire a facilitator for this one too? I mean, where are we at? How long is it gonna go on? There isn't an easy answer. We know that there isn't an easy answer, which means somebody's gonna have to make a difficult choice. And maybe the difficult choice is like, we're unwilling to choose. That's also an option, which appears to be the choice that we are all willing to make. Because nobody else is willing to say anything about it. Anyway, I'm just really frustrated at the whole process, having been super involved in this for a lot of years. I think that we should have higher expectations of ourselves. That's all.
Excellent.
I just wanna run over and kick that can over there.
I know I need something more to bring to the people of mine that I represent. And I don't have dollars. I don't have a good plan. A good thought out plan with detail to present to them. And I'm not. My people want to keep it status quo. If they really didn't, they'd be pounding down my door. Maybe they will tomorrow or after watching this. But right now, they don't want to change. And until I get a sense that people they want change, like they're really angry about their taxes, really angry about how the system's run, and they're really beating things down, it's kind of hard to cause chaos. I don't like kicking the can either. I could see potential, but I can't produce the potential of what the one campus model can do. I can't provide the information and facts and details that the people will want that I represent. And the price tag. There has to be a price tag on everything. And we don't have those numbers. I can't see how we can get to where we can produce those numbers.
Thanks, Dan. What was that? Okay. And then,
I will say I was not part of the earlier process. I appreciate all the work that you all put in. I have watched a bunch of the community meetings and it's clear it's been a lot of work and it's been important work. That said, since I joined, my understanding was we were waiting for the feasibility study, and for me that's really important to think about what's next and how we proceed. It's maybe a slightly different question than you all were asking before, but I think that is important and it's valuable to have that. To the extent the board thinks a continuing conversation is important, how do we, whether we're waiting for people to come knocking at the door or whether we're doing a gentler form of stewarding this conversation forward with a longer term view in mind, I'll say I'm happy to work with folks if the board decides that's useful. Maybe rather than a big plan for this coming budget season, like this has to be an ongoing conversation, but it seems to me that this is coming into process new, like it's an important step to understand that these are the facts we're dealing with now.
just to clarify, so you haven't seen the feasibility study?
I'm saying that, like, I'm looking at Bob's conclusion that it's not feasible. Like, this summary, is that a fair reading that the interpretation
the feasibility
is not
study,
very feasible? Like,
the feasibility study doesn't conclude with it's not feasible. It concludes with here's how you make it work. And there's a list of, the administration took what they said, figured out in order to make that happen, what would we need? And they talked about possible additions to the building, to this building. Additions to Townsend is too challenging because of septic and water demands. So it was like, all of it involved basically either adding on to and or renting space somewhere else needed on
Understood.
campus. So the idea of the challenge, like how do we do this at a flat cost and improve education on one campus model? It wasn't going to be that. And so we, I guess, took the conclusion that it wasn't feasible to do that. It's feasible to do it, but it's going to cost you more. And you're putting money into a building that you don't, I don't know. I mean, you're putting money into a 50-plus-year-old building. So, I mean, I guess that's the question. It's like, is that something that people want to take on?
Understood, and forgive me if I'm
Yeah.
being too,
So, and I can give you a copy of the report as well, so you can get.
But in terms of how we think about the next steps, it sounds like the conversation that was on the table wasn't feasible, but I think that a continuing conversation with thinking, how do we think about this longer term, build on the work that's been done, because a lot of work has been done by professionals, but also by this board, but it seems like it's worth continuing a bigger conversation.
Kristen?
So, I understand what they're saying about the feasibility study, like the playground stuff, that stuff. It's a 50-year-old building, but in the long term, you're gonna have to put money into the building so that future generations can use it. So, I mean, I understand people are upset about taxes, but I think running 3 buildings also is a huge tax burden. I understand, adding to this is gonna be a tax burden. So in both scenarios, we're looking at a tax burden. So I think just have to pull the trigger and decide where we want that burden to be. I mean, because Townsend, they have a lot of students. Newfane, they have a lot of students. I mean, we can't combine into one K through 5 because I don't think they'll fit at Townsend. I don't think they'll fit at Newfane. I think with the teacher shortages, we need to start thinking about a school that has 2 grades, 2 teachers, because it was a pretty big deal this year to fill those positions, and it's not getting any better.
It's true. Thanks, Kristen. Kevin?
This is a long-term conversation, and I've been on this board or part of this board for many years, and I've been having this conversation as long as I've been here. So, Jennifer?
No, I think you laid the foundation for this building.
I probably should. I actually should mention this before I forget. I do have some plans of this building that I keep meaning to bring up here. From when I was chairing, it was given to me for safekeeping, and I need to get it back here, not in my house.
Sounds like you did the job. You kept it safe.
I have done my job and kept it safe, but remind me someone because I keep walking by them where they're sitting near my door so I can remember to bring them, and I forget. So that's an important piece. But what I wanted to say was, it's been alluded to already, but it's been very clear to me that there's a reason why we haven't come to a conclusion, right? And it's not just because it's hard, but things are always changing and fluid. And as much as I share the disappointment that we weren't able to take something on, I'm very mindful of the fact that we've gone through some administrative changes, and this has been a really tough summer. I'm just gonna say it's been a tough summer across the board. So that being said, we are now in September, and we don't have time to do anything. I think we could all agree that we don't have time to do anything for a budget this year. But there does seem to be, from what I'm hearing, interest in continuing having this conversation, and I know how difficult it is to continue to have this conversation, maybe more than anybody. But the conversation continues to change as time has gone on, and I have watched it change even in the last few years, this conversation, and I welcome that change because I think we're doing better as we continue to have the conversation, even though it is at the same time kicking the can down the road. And there are parents who are saying, it should have happened long before my kids even entered the school system. And I can't argue with them either. I would just put out one other thing, that there is a study going on school construction right now, and while that was also delayed, it was supposed to be much farther down the road because of all the flooding and the challenges at the state level, across the state level, that started only just recently. But that study will get completed, and I want us to pay close attention to that as we're moving forward, because I continue to advocate for finding a way to support our schools and our facilities across the state as a state, so that we can come back and find a way to help fund these challenges, because we're not the only ones with these challenges. I don't know what it's going to look like. Like I said, the study really has only just begun, but it is in place, and it is going to move forward, and we should be really closely following that. So, laying that out there.
Good news. Yeah, good.
I'm really disappointed that we're not going to be able to put something in front of our voters again. I think we sat downstairs and predicted that we would be in this situation because of the way that we were approaching this. So the fact that we were sitting here another year with nothing to present to the voters should not be a surprise to anybody, because I can say that as one of the people that worked on long-term planning, and when we restarted long-term planning again, we actually warned the board that continuing on this path would get us nowhere, and that is where we are. But I also want to add a couple other things about our upcoming budget season, so that people can remember where we were last year. And because of COVID era funding, we were able to buy down certain aspects of our program, not only locally, but through the SU. And we artificially lowered our tax rates by utilizing surplus funding at the SU level as well as at the local level. We heard last meeting, though we don't have the minutes, so I can't quote the number, but we have a surplus. And more than likely, the board is going to have to artificially buy down our budget again to try to ease the tax burden. That did not have enough effect on the taxes this year in Jamaica. We saw a 20% increase in our tax rates. We are going to, at some point, have to be honest with the public about the actual cost of delivery. Our per pupil spending, if it's not the highest in the state, it's got to be one of the highest in the state as far as what it costs us to educate our kids. And as the board, it is very disappointing to me that we're not going to put any plan in front of our voters to address what has been a long building and predictable problem that we put ourselves into as a board, where we're going to have to make tough decisions this fall about another 20% tax increase for student programming. We're going to be back to that again. And I know, as uncomfortable as the hot June night was in the Dutton gym, standing in front of our students and telling them we've got to eliminate more programs because we're unwilling to make the necessary changes to secure their education is going to be more uncomfortable for me than having a tough conversation. So this is my disappointment with us as a board not presenting anything. No solution. Not a, we're not going to get it this year, but here's our plan for next year. But we're coming back with no solution at all for, I believe, we're at least 4 straight years where we'll have it for next budget year, we'll have it for next budget year, we'll have it for next budget year as well. Yeah, longer than that. And we're coming up empty-handed for our constituents once again. Even if that plan was, look, we need $20 million to build you an addition, it would be a plan that we could put in front of our voters. But what we have is inconclusive. We're going to try again, which is disappointing to me. And I think we should all be prepared to stare down the voters and the students and let them know that because we have not been able to come up with a plan, we're going to seriously have to look at cutting programming as an option to control expenses. We can't continue to see our expenses go up, tax rates go up like we have. And there's no more COVID money coming. So I think I'm going to stop now.
Thanks, Drew. Peter.
So talking about that crazy plan, $20 million, what was the price tag on these two options? You were
To make it feasible, you mean?
you were alluding that
We don't have a price tag because we didn't spend the money to ask them how much it was gonna cost. They just gave us like, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, but we don't have actual numbers to put to that because we have to pay them to tell us how much that would cost. We can estimate, we can give it rough estimates, but this building is challenging to add on to because of the shape and the hillside and the fact that it's 50 years old. So it's like, there's only certain places you can do it. One of the examples is like where the art room was added on a number of years ago. You could do another level on top of that. You could do the same thing on this side over here. Like there's ways to add on that keeps the original footprint, but you're going up higher in certain places. So like it's a solvable problem if the plan is we're gonna do that model and we're gonna make it work and we're gonna ask the taxpayers for $20 million or whatever the number is, right? Just to pick a number. So I guess it depends on what if you're worried about the tax rates and that's your number one driver, then doing nothing is going to be cheaper than putting a $20 million bond for the taxpayers. So that's the only answer, is to do nothing. It's the cheapest answer.
The cheapest answer is to close the school.
Well,
If we're talking about the cheapest answer.
you say close the school, what, all the schools? Like what are you talking about?
We didn't say, we actually said we voted
We did.
not to do
We
that.
did. I was just-
But only 9/12.
Just saying that the cheapest answer.
That's not.
But we
that's
talked
actually not
about
always
that. It wasn't true. We talked, it was a $5,000 savings to do
That's right.
that. It was, I believe it was
Those
reported.
numbers were not accurate.
But other school districts have proved
So,
that it's not.
At any rate,
$26,000 versus $15,000 in tuition.
all my point is that if you're looking to save the taxpayers relief, then the decision to do nothing is your best option. Sometimes it's the trade you don't make at the trade deadline in sports that is the one that's the right one, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that's the right decision, I'm just saying sometimes that's the right decision. But if you're gonna spend more money and you wanna talk about how to look for the future, figure out what you're gonna do, then there's a variety of plans we can come up with
Right.
to do that. I don't think we're saying there aren't any plans. We have
That's right.
numerous pages of plans. We just have to say that we're gonna push one of those forward. And that's the part that if a long-term planning committee met and they were charged by the board to pick a plan to push out, and then you analyzed all the things you guys have already talked about, and then you push one out, then that could be an outcome. I'm not suggesting that's the right answer. I'm just telling you that's a way to get an outcome. And you put it to the vote, you see what happens.
I just want to add that the least expensive solution would be to do nothing short term.
Correct.
I don't want it to sound like that's the answer, because that's a short term decision to make for the immediate. I am never going to suggest that we sit back and do nothing. I think we maybe need to go back and make another decision about what problem are we trying to solve, and really get back into that, because I don't know whether the administration is going to come to us this year and say we need to cut programming to keep our. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I don't know what the answer will be when the time comes to have a budget presented to us. I'd like to know what that is. I really would. I'd like to know where we're sitting right now. All I was trying to say is not that we stop this or we stop this conversation. I'm just saying we are now in September and the budget needs to start right now. So we're kind of boxed into a corner, and short term, this is probably the only step we have right now. But we shouldn't stop. looking at this. And one more thing I'll just say
Yeah,
before
go
we do
for it.
this,
Go
is
for it.
that we aren't hearing from our communities, but if we are starting to cut programs or I don't think we're hearing great numbers. If we're gonna start cutting programs or we're gonna start raising taxes more than they have been, we are going to start here. And that is going to drive a decision. And that's what I was trying to say early on. There's a reason why we're here right now, why we haven't come up with a solution yet.
Okay, sorry, just one point. Yes, your taxes did go up in Jamaica 20%, but the number in front of me, that the unified tax rate was actually a penny less than the previous year.
After we bought it down, right?
We bought it down, yes.
We did not, WCSU did. I don't know that number in front of me either. But yes, there was some money supplied. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, where Emily had said, the administration comes back, this is what it's gonna cost. What if the board gave the admin, this is a figure, stay within or below that figure and make it work? Then we'd have the situation where it would come back. Well, we can only do that figure if we cut this class, and that would open up that discussion. Because at some day, we're gonna cost ourselves right out of existence, where taking 9 through 12 and going to Brattleboro will actually be feasible and looking good. I mean, if we got the highest tax rate, and then we're gonna go higher, and then we're gonna cut classes, and we're not, homeschooling's gonna look a whole lot better from pre-K to 12. Well, maybe it is a better deal. But at some point, you gotta control the spending. The board's job is to control the spending, hire the people, make it happen. And I think we've lost that. I feel like we've lost that, really, as a board.
We've lost what?
We've lost control of the spending. We get what the WCSU says, well, this is what we need, pay for it. This is what we need, pay for it. It's a constant, gimme money. And I feel like we've kind of lost control where, no, you can't do that. This is way too much money. We're responsible to the taxpayers while providing a good education for our kids, but that we're pricing ourselves out of existence. I think we need to kind of rein it in a little bit. And I don't like the idea of the CSU presenting their budget sort of like before ours. When we vote on ours, it's kind of like being held hostage a little bit. I don't agree with it. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. There's a lot of us out there that probably don't agree with how it just seems uncontrolled spending. And maybe it's time we put a stop to it.
Greg.
Can't see who it is.
Greg.
Oh, Greg, go ahead. Sort of.
I just wanted to take a minute to just kind of affirm and support the work that's been done. There's a ton of information that you all have now between this feasibility study, some of the previous work that's been done, some of the long-term planning calculations that have been done financially. I felt this way in the spring as well, and I feel like the path forward is to find a way to get a lot of the right people in a room who are willing to make a really tough decision that might not make you a lot of friends at the next town cookout, and have the hard conversations about what financially makes sense for our buildings, for our students. Because I can tell you that from a building maintenance standpoint, I see that you have bought down your tax rates for all these years. Like buildings need a lot of investment, and we've been working really hard to make it. And I want to continue that. But I want to continue to be, financially transparent and responsible to you all as well. But we can't do those things that we're doing, with no money either. So it's just, it's a tough spot we're in, but I think that there is enough information, enough of the right people that are committed to it to do something. And I would ask you to say that, by a certain date, X committee is going to have something to put forth, period. That is probably a can that has also been kicked and a term that has also been used. I just haven't been here for it. So.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Just very quickly, the statement has been made several times that we have artificially bought down our tax rates. And I think on the surface, you can't argue that point. But I would also say that we have done some really, through good financial management, some really sound decision-making to allow ourselves to build, which we never used to do, mind you, but we do now, build a surplus in to allow ourselves to be able to do that. It isn't that, well, we got lucky. Now, I'm not trying to say that there weren't funds that came in to help us during this time, federal dollars that came in, but we also could have spent those earlier instead of having found sound financial management and having the surplus fund to be able to do this. There's a bigger picture than just being lucky and buying down our taxes.
I think at the center of our conversation about long-term planning are buildings. And because we have not made decisions about what we're gonna do with our buildings, Greg is in a position where he's doing maintenance to buildings that have been neglected, under-maintained for a period of time. We're gonna be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a sprinkler system for this building. We approved $200,000 for a ventilation system, I think, for Townsend at the last meeting. Exact number, quote me on later. So we are making significant financial investments in infrastructure that we haven't even decided if we want to use in the long term. Let that sink in for a minute as far as fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers. If we had made a plan 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe we wouldn't be putting a sprinkler system in this building now because we'd be looking at a new building. Maybe if we decided that we were going to go with a one campus model, but we were going to go with a single elementary school, and that was going to be Newbrook, we wouldn't be spending $200,000 or $250,000 on a ventilation upgrade for the Townsend building. So the reason why we're having to maintain all of these buildings is because we have no plan. So yes, it's costing us money and our taxpayers' money, because we are not providing them with a decision to make. We paved Newbrook's parking lot. Well, if we're going to go to a one campus model, we probably didn't need to do the pavement. But we don't know what we want to do because we're not willing to make the decision. It doesn't mean that we have to change it today. It doesn't mean that we have to, move all the kids to a single campus or move everybody from Jamaica to Townsend or Townsend to Jamaica today. But we should have a plan so that we stop investing in infrastructure that may not have a future in our district. It may not be wise for us to spend $200,000 in Townsend. Maybe that's not the right building. Maybe that $200,000 we're spending in Townsend to upgrade their ventilation system should be put towards an addition and new thing so that all the kids fit. But we're not doing it with a plan. And I guess that's what's most frustrating about where we're at now. These are big ticket items that we're paying for with no actual strategy.
Chris?
So I have a question and a suggestion. My question is, when you guys merged, wasn't it decided that no school could be closed unless a town voted to close it? So if the students are moved out of that building, does anybody know what the expenses of still maintaining that building? Because if a town doesn't vote to close it, we're still going to be responsible to maintain it, correct?
I think the spirit of it is that the kids are there
Yeah.
unless they close it. It's not just we're putting heat in it, like we're using it for educational purposes, I think it's,
That's the one.
Yeah. Yes, that's.
so you can't just pull the kids and keep paying the heat, but that's not in the spirit of it. Or,
You should be having that conversation with the public. So we don't want to do that in a vacuum. We have been charged with gathering, processing the information, and presenting that information to the voters. At the end of the day, it's the voters that will decide. And if the voters aren't with us, well, then they send us back to the drawing board. We haven't presented anything to the voters. We don't have a product. We have some research, but we have nothing to offer to our voters. That's what we're supposed to be by now. At a point where we go to our voters and go, hey, we've looked at this. This is what we're thinking the best plan is. And as Emily knows, sitting on this board for years, sometimes they say, absolutely not. But we need to present it to them. Like, that's how this process works. And you're right. We may present that we're going to close the elementary school in Townsend, and the voters may come out here and lynch all of us. And then we'll know for certain that they're not okay with that.
Yeah.
And we can move to a new plan. Part of that is providing them with the appropriate data and the information that we've gathered and a plan.
so and this has been a great conversation. I know it's like tense, people are upset and frustrated with the whole thing. That's kind of my point. We need to have something we're putting forward. I don't think there's any new information that's going to go into this, right, Drew? Like, is there anything new that we're missing, you think? I don't think so. I think that, as it has been said, like the reason that one of these hasn't already been put forward is that there isn't an ideal. So if the board wants to put something forward, we just need the people to sit in a room and pick the one they want to do and talk about it. Right? Because if there's no new ideas, Lindsay, what's the alternative?
I just,
Status quo.
my,
Be short of building a new building, short of that, maybe that's the 75-year plan. But like the short term, I can't imagine anything we're gonna do that's not on these 2 pages.
I'm just wondering what bigger extent, other than hiring a private facilitator to come to how many extra meetings? And have all of the extra public input and have special meetings at all of the schools to get more community feedback. I literally do not know what else a new committee could do other than just pick a thing, which then the rest of the board's gonna go, oh, because we feel uncomfortable with picking a thing, because that's exactly what we just have been through multiple times. I literally don't know what possible next step we could do other than just as a board say, here's what we're gonna do. That's literally it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sell it.
Yeah. I think that the board should make a decision. Obviously, we can't make a decision before this next budget, but I think that we should be able to tell the public this is what we want to do by the new year or shortly after.
Sorry, I just want to bring something back that Bob said, and again, I love that analogy. So yeah, maybe the answer right now is to not do anything, right? And then to look forward to what is that 75-year plan? Is it building that new building? What is coming up through legislation? That's, I think, where we could be productive as a long-term planning committee or group to find where's the real estate for that. Is it the same real estate? Do we knock this building down and start over again? Do we find some additional real estate? I think those are the kind of questions that we need to think about.
And I think Drew's right. I think if you have something to present, and if it's by the new year before the budget vote happens, and people are like, oh, so they're thinking, they have a plan. I do think that's valuable. I mean, maybe it is the longer term thing that we're talking about, and we're scrapping all the short term stuff. Maybe that is the answer. I don't know. I keep coming back to, like, if there was something that was a really good short term solution, we would have already come up with it. And every time we do, somebody gets shouted off the stage, and we get gun shy about the angry group that comes to talk to us about the one thing that we're trying to. You know what I'm right?
I was just gonna say that about it. It's not as though we haven't presented it to the voting public, no, but they have seen our ideas, and each different group or faction has come to us with their opposing view. So yeah, we've seen that, if not by a vote, certainly in meetings.
Yeah, we've never presented a plan where somebody said, wow, that's a good plan. We have never done that. We have presented a lot of bad plans and taken them on public tours and been shot down by all kinds of public support. We have never had any public support for any of the plans that we've proposed in all of this work here. So, you know, which bad plan do we want to pick and go forward? Now, I agree. You know, we probably should do something, but there should be a this and. Because, you know, we looked at all of this stuff and a lot of this doesn't make sense for one reason or another, and the feasibility study for the single campus, sure, we could do it. But just because you can do a thing doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. It doesn't fit with the buildings and the space and the travel. Okay, so that's probably not the plan. We could close one and put people somewhere or do this or do that, but, you know, we've seen those meetings. The solution is not, I mean, all the options are on this document. The good solution that's gonna have all of our public saying, man, they did a good job. I don't know if it's here, you know? Short term, sure. Well, we're gonna do this, and while we do that, we're gonna look at this, and the real solution here, folks, that's gonna solidify public education in our district for the next 50 to 75 years is to identify that real estate and to build the building and to see when the state funding kicks in and do this. And it's gonna be a bond and it's gonna eventually do this. And while that construction happens here, we can do these things. And is it gonna be perfect? No, but at least still continue. You know, that's the kind of roadmap we need to give people to actually get some support. Because, yeah, we're just gonna close this one and smush everybody here and do that. Sure, there's gonna be people that don't like that idea. And most of the studies that we've done that look at closing this school or closing that school or moving these kids around or doing this or that, none of them really save that much money. The real reality is, you know, we're a tiny little district running a whole bunch of programs, and the high school is the most expensive one because you wanna give them options and AP courses and all of that. Well, that requires staff. And 80-90% of our costs are staff. So, you know, do we cut staff? That's programs, that's not supporting the students. I mean, it's a mess. The whole system is just a mess. But the solution, there's no short-term solution that's gonna make things better and save us money. The fact is, it's gonna cost money, but you're absolutely right, we should have a plan. And we should just say, here's our plan, this is what we're gonna do, and start talking and start moving towards that. And I think you're suggested to me, wow, look at all the hands up. Your idea is right. Get those people and say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Here's how it works for the next, you know, the 5, the 10, and the 75.
All right, I don't know, I think Kate, you had your hand first, and then we'll go, I'm not sure over here.
I just want to say, not only do we need a plan, but we need a good plan. And I haven't heard anyone say we have a good plan. I hear you say we have bad plans, and I think we need to come up with a plan that is a good plan. It is hard, but it is not impossible. And that is what we owe to our voters and our towns. And we need a plan that says we are doing this because it's great for our kids and our families, not just the only thing, and I know it's not the only thing that's there, but the only thing that's come up in any meeting I've been in so far for the last few months is taxpayers. And that is important, but it is not what's driving our schools. And I think maybe this is where we get to Emily's point about asking the right questions, and it's not to discount any of this work, but we need to lead with what's good for our kids. And I think that will, like, if we're looking for what's good rather than bad or what's avoiding what's bad, I think that might help us focus our efforts in a positive way. I want to work on something that's going to be good for all of us.
Let's go here, Renee, and then
I do want to point out that, Joe, you said that we have a lot of bad plans. However, I think you should have phrased it as we have a lot of plans that have negative aspects. And so your point of we need to have a good plan is that what you're saying, I think, is that you want to have a plan that has more positive aspects than negative aspects. Because I don't think there is a plan. I've only lived in this world 19 years, almost 20. However, the world is not black and white from my experience. There is no plan that is going to have no negatives. It just doesn't exist. Maybe I'm naive. Please, some 80-year-old correct me.
You're looking for an 8-year-old?
But I think you're right in that perspective is really important. Instead of calling a plan a bad plan or a good plan, we need to define what that means. So a bad plan, you are saying, possibility, is that you are saying that the negative aspects that you outline outweigh the positive aspects. Then the positive and then for a good plan, maybe, the positive aspects outweigh the negative aspects. So if we would all look, so when a committee, or personally I think, because committees have not worked in the past, from what I hear and from what I've seen, just a whole board meeting at a separate time, and to just define and to lay out, go mug by mug. Okay, here's a negative, here's a positive, here's a negative. Or maybe you others have a better definition of a good or bad plan. But those are two words. If English class has taught me anything here at Leland and Gray, it is that good and bad are two very overused words that have a very open definition. And actually providing a full definition to it, I think, is very important, instead of throwing them around on, well, this sheet, it's useless, bad plans. Why they're bad? Because they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just, most of you are local, so maybe you know this, but I had a lady approach me at Townsend from Grace Cottage, and they are expanding their septic system. So that's just a piece of information for you, because I know that the septic was an issue at Townsend. So, and also just to kind of piggyback on what Kate was saying, I think, whatever decision you make or what plan you come up with, no, you're not going to make everybody happy. That's kind of impossible to do. But I think I agree, we have focused a lot on the financials, and I know that is important. But I also think when you are trying to sell things to parents and families, focusing on what's best for students is hard to argue. So.
Yeah, just really quickly, I just want to say, sort of in context of all of this conversation, doesn't really matter what the plans were. What actually matters, because it has been ongoing for a really long time, we have not come to consensus. It's just that simple. The board knows it's their decision, and we have not come to consensus. And there's a reason we haven't come to consensus. This is hard, and we haven't been driven enough to make a decision that's hard yet. We haven't come to consensus. And I don't think we should beat ourselves up over that. I think that it is just a fact. We haven't been able to come up with a solution that we were willing to present to the public. But it sounds to me like we're still willing to try. And I think we should continue to do that on whatever time plan or timeline that we can come up with, whether it's fast, whether it's slow, whether we go right back to the, what are we doing this for? Really going back and saying, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Or whether we just say, let's get together as a board and make a decision on, the long-term planning committee can say, here's 3 options, and we make a decision, we move forward. It doesn't really matter. I just think that we should acknowledge the fact that there's a reason why we didn't make a decision. Because I think there's a reason we didn't make a decision. It's because we just couldn't, as a board, come to consensus. Like other times.
So the reason we did the feasibility study on the single campus model is because that was identified as having the best outcomes and positive educational benefits for students. And that was information that was gathered through our administration and our teachers. So the focus has been student-centered from the very beginning. But we can't ignore the increasing cost of educating our kids. So there are some challenges, And I appreciate Peter, saying that these aren't necessarily good plans and bad plans, because you're right. We're never going to make every single group happy, and regardless of what we decided to put out for a proposal, we're always going to get an angry mob of some size coming to a meeting and telling us that we're doing it wrong. But I also don't think that we received a feasibility study. The reason we moved forward with the feasibility study on the physical buildings was because the board did have consensus that they liked the educational opportunities that it presented. That's why we went down that path. We did run into some challenges with that plan that came up during the feasibility study. I don't know that we've, as a board, discussed those challenges and maybe solutions to those challenges. I also don't understand why we can't make a decision if all of the available information is in front of us. And we've established that there's no new information that we're seeking, then we should be able to make a decision. We should not keep excusing ourselves for a timeline, because what does waiting another year do if there's no more information available to us than there is now? We should look at the information we have, and if there's a gap, absolutely, we should have it. If there's something missing, we need it. And maybe that is tasking the administration with, well, what is the price tag? Because as we heard, we never asked that question. We got a feasibility study that said, in order to make this work, we're going to have to do some work on your buildings. And it stopped there. What we didn't ask was, well, how much work? How much money? We know that we went down that path because it was the most educationally sound plan that we could come up with. Like grade banding, making sure that all of our students had access to nurses and counselors, and we can go down the entire list that we studied. But as soon as we got to the point where there was a challenge in the plan, we went, oop, problem. Let's not come up with the numbers to solve the problem. So I think we have the information, with the exception of maybe the price tag. I don't see any reason to wait any longer. Just make a decision.
I just want to push back a little bit on that. It feels kind of like you're saying the administration didn't dig deeper on that. The administration wasn't charged with doing that. The feasibility study wasn't, there was no board approval to move forward with that. So I just want to,
yes,
we probably do have minutes from that meeting. So I think you're right.
The board, and I completely accept that. The board never said, give us the next piece of information.
If the board wants to authorize us to push Stevens to do that, I'm sure they'd be happy to take our money and do that. I mean,
it sounds like they're going to be doing an entire set of plans on our building here at Blue and the Gray anyway, so maybe we can get a twofer.
Sprinkle new areas too, right? While you're at
So, absolutely.
Oh, we'll have to.
So, I mean, I think if that's what people want to do, and you want to do that as a whole board decision, we want to continue down that road and explore, get us some harder numbers before we ditch that as an alternative. That's a plan. That's something, right? And so we can have that conversation. We can get those numbers. We can get back from them and find out what that looks like. And then the next step is, okay, given the cost X and given this building Y, are we filling potholes, or are we repaving, or are we bringing it down to the foundation? Like how, then you have to make those kind of decisions at that point. So yeah, but that would give you more information. That's true. So, I mean, I think you would need a board vote to authorize me to explore that with Stevens, because it is another expenditure. I don't have a clue. I don't know if Greg is still on the call. If he would have a sense of what that would cost from Stevens, I don't know.
He's shaking his head no.
He doesn't know.
I have no idea what that would cost you. I mean, right. I mean, we think you paid what, $25,000 for the feasibility study. For them to put like a number that's something that you're willing to put forward to the public. I mean, you almost need to have like a set of plans, right? I mean, so, however, after the fire sprinkler plans, we will have a much nicer set of plans to build something off of. I recall Brud saying rough number was like over $500 a square foot if you're going up. So everything at Leland and Gray was basically up.
Well, there was one option that had it coming out the front, which would have been new construction. We don't know.
Right. Well, I actually think you guys' motion was to do all of them, right?
Well, depending on which option you want to explore, that there may be some that would require multiples. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what I mean. So it's hard to say. Just that there's so many variables at this point. To try to tell you what they would charge you, I wouldn't want to be on record of a number that I would really be grasping. So.
All right. Do we want to do that? Do we want to?
Seems like we ought to ask for the number anyway.
Let's get an estimate on that.
Do we know what we're asking for, like a kind
So
of, like.
the feasibility study had a couple of different possibilities, and we could maybe have them price each of those separately. Then we can ascertain the cost per what you gain from that particular thing and compare it and add them and subtract them and,
We should just be sure that we're using that estimate the best possible way we can if we're gonna pay for it. I think that's important. I will say just something to remember is that new buildings have maintenance costs too, and that's a huge issue in all new construction planning. Everyone thinks we have a new building, it's not gonna cost us anything for 20 years, and we're gonna spend money from year one. It's just how things work, and we shouldn't pretend that we're not gonna have the same ongoing maintenance costs for a new building. Not that that's bad, but it's gonna be part of the long-term cost.
And I guess my follow-up question is does the board view that pursuit of information as a short-term or long-term or both? Or you don't know yet till you know?
Right.
You want to get the information first and then decide what it's actually representing?
Yeah, I would think so.
Well, just
point about potholes and.
And the reason I ask is because you could do two things parallel. You could do that and you could explore that in the one campus, and you could simultaneously appoint a longer term planning committee to talk about that.
To find that piece of real estate.
To look at the 50-year plan and to think about that. So those two things could be completely parallel.
I think Stevens would be able to give us a good sense of, is this a $500,000 or is this a $5 million short midterm plan? And
I wanna know
yeah.
what we're asking from them and what that is going to cost us, because if we're doing what you just described, that shouldn't be a huge estimate, but I don't know what kind of estimate they're happy or willing to give us, and I think we need to know that, because we actually haven't made a decision about which direction. In fact, I did look back at the minutes, and what we said was we were gonna have the administration come back to us in August and present, even take tours around to the schools by the board and the administration and make a decision in October. And we're not at that place. We didn't actually make a decision on either of those. So now we're asking for estimates on both because we haven't made a decision. And I just want to know what that's gonna cost. Because if it's gonna cost a huge amount of money, let's have a discussion around the board, which one we feel stronger about, right?
Yeah, I think the two options from the feasibility study, one had less addition and one had more addition. They both had additions required to make it feasible. And so there was 3 locations that we were looking at. There was the 2 wings and the front. And so I think if the charge is to get pricing on each of those things individually and a total, then you can then it gives you more information like, well, if it's the total package, maybe option 2 becomes off the table because of that cost. And now you're really focused on option 1, then you can pick and choose which of these things you want to do to fit the needs that you have. Now you have a dollar amount. Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make some assumption about what the willingness is of Stevens and Associates to give us an estimate. I mean, they may have just square boxes that they fill and it doesn't cost as much money at all. And if that's fine, that's fine. But if they're saying, sorry, can't give you those numbers until we do blah, 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 well then that is a different conversation. We need to.
It's not gonna, I think between Greg and I, we can have a conversation with them and find out what it is that they're looking for. At this time, without a motion, we're not authorized to do anything with it, just get the information, right? To find out,
So.
unless you vote to do something to authorize up to X amount of dollars. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just wanna make sure we're not stumbling around talking to them for a month before the next meeting and then we're deciding what to do.
I was just gonna make, so maybe a not to exceed, right? If you could give me permission to sign off on a not to exceed of, I'm making it up, 10,000, 15,000.
Well, I have a question actually. So when we worked with Stevens and Associates on this, we said, is it feasible as is, right? That was the question that we asked. And they basically replied, no, but if you did some more square footage, it could work. Here's some possibilities for that. That was the question we did not ask Stevens and Associates is, if this were to be a really great one campus, what would the addition look like?
What's the 50-year version look like? Is that what you're
Because the answer may be significantly different, not necessarily cost-wise, or maybe cost-wise. I think that the asking them, okay, how much is it gonna cost to add X number of square footage to the building is one question. And it's a very different question to say, is that something that we're happy with? If we're going to add to a building, then if it's whatever, 10% plus 10%, and you end up with something that's like, dang, that's nice. Now it actually functions super well. Maybe we should consider that as the question. So I just want to be cautious about how we are asking for information from them.
Well, and that's the thing with the feasibility study that we did. We didn't ask them to look at anything else.
Exactly. We didn't ask for what is the how.
We didn't ask them about Newbrook, we didn't ask them about
it?
Jamaica. We just said one campus here, Townsend.
Well, even the one campus, we didn't say, how do you do a one campus here? We said, can we do a one campus without touching anything? And they said, not really. Okay, so is the next question, how much does it cost for X number of square feet? Or is the next question, okay, so if it doesn't work as is, what's the best way to make one campus happen? If we're gonna add something, what could that look like? I
think that's what these two options, what would be that next, or how much it would cost for the additional space. So I think if we, and I forget who made the point about, or probably you, what about beyond that? So is this like a short-term fix, short to medium term? And then we also task them with the real estate, the new building, and all of that.
Yeah, I guess my point was just, I don't know that we don't know whether it needs to be a new building. We also don't know that it needs to be the additions they proposed. Because that wasn't really a proposal from them, it was just we see you needing X, and maybe this is a way you get X, not here is a way that you achieve your goal, right? It was strictly about square footage. Anyway.
So, after the administration. Yeah, that's how we got where we are today.
Yeah.
Actually, go ahead.
Is the question that we're at after the feasibility study, how do we best proceed with the one campus model? Or is the question, knowing what we do about the feasibility study, what is the best of the plans thinking about the campuses? Like, I don't know that we have, and forgive me if I've missed it, but I don't think we've decided, and it's kind of it may be right, but we haven't decided that the one campus model is the one we're pursuing unequivocally now that we've gotten to this feasibility study that says it's not like a magic ticket, which it seemed like it might have been, right? We could use this building, we could do this all, but we're back at the question, I think, like, which is the best model now that we know that we can't just make this work? And I know that's a longer process, but I think it's important to, if that's where we are in the process, like to go back to that question, and maybe it's, well, we think it's the best model, that's why we're gonna pursue it, but I think that's a different place than it wasn't feasible, which model do we wanna pursue?
Sorry, I'll get to you in a second. But I think finding out, what's the price tag for doing this, that will help us figure out a lot of things, hopefully. And also tasking them, as you said, we didn't say, what do you do with Jamaica? What do you do with Newbrook? Right? It is a, yes, maybe one campus, but we still have the whole campus, the whole district.
Right, and the other piece of this is doing this doesn't, even if the voters are like, yeah, that sounds great, you still have to deal with the logistics of how are you dealing with the other two buildings? Is there education happening there, or is it requiring a town? Like, there's a lot of other political elements to this that have to be figured out too. And it's tough, and we talked about this a lot of times, that like, Townsend is the center, so like, it makes sense for this to be the center, because it's the center. But Townsend Elementary School is the worst possible site, Newfane is the best possible site with the way that they have the land spread up, but it's also like practically in Dummerston. So like, you know what I mean? Like, there's elements of these things that are all, and Jamaica's smaller, but it has beautiful property abutting a state park. Like, all the buildings have pluses and minuses, and some you can add on to and some you can't. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a simple thing. This is why we're where we are. I don't think it's because people are dragging their feet. I think it's because it's hard.
So kind of going off of what Lindsay was saying with asking the right question and asking, would we be asking for them to give us are we asking, if we would ask the question that Lindsay was suggesting, what is your suggestion? Is that what is your suggestion based off of 1 to 4 in Townsend, 5 to 12 in LNG, pre-K and K off-site? And what is your suggestion for option 2? Or is it, what is your suggestion? Where do you want to put the grade? Right. So I'm wondering, like, do we know which question are we asking for them to tell us where best to put grades and all the other levels on top of that? Or are we asking for them to give us how would it be best to do that? How would it be best to do each of the 2 different options?
You lost me a little bit there, but I would say we're just trying to continue the feasibility study.
So I think where I'm confused is that did they tell us that based off of their feasibility study, did they tell us that 1 to 4 in Townsend, 5 to 12 in LNG, pre-K and K off-site, that's one option? Did they tell us those exact grade layouts, or was that parameters?
No, I don't believe we gave that.
So they told us that.
It was a back and forth. There was a lot of conversation around it because they had to figure out what the goal of the one campus, from my recollection, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, had to do with getting all the kids from one grade in one place to get the best possible benefit of having social, emotional, as well as academic benefits of having everybody in one place. That was the whole purpose of it. It doesn't matter where that is, but because Townsend's in the middle, that's why the one campus was explored at Townsend. And because high school's here, I assume. That was the logic, right? And so that was where that came out of. And then you have you have certain, because if you can't add on to Townsend, there's only so many classrooms. So how many grades can you fit there? Well, it depends. You can go pre-K2, you can go 1 through 4, but you basically are fitting 4 grades. And that's it. So you're limited by where you start, drives how far you get, and then the rest you can figure out what to do with. So that's kind of how they ended up with those potential configurations, based on the limits of what Townsend can do, and then figuring out where everybody else goes. And what would be needed to make them go there.
Okay.
Is that fair? Does that seem like?
So if we, sorry, can I?
Sure.
So if we were to ask that question of what is your suggestion, that same sort of dialogue would probably happen on, because the reason why I'm asking about this is because I don't think it's worth it to ask about these two options and saying, what are your ideas behind these two options? I think we should say, what is your idea behind a singular option? But if it's all dependent on just a dialogue that happens during the feasibility study, then my point is mute.
Well, keep in mind, they're not educators, they're designers, so they're not, and engineers, so they're not thinking about like what, we're telling them how many spaces we need for X, how many spaces we need for Y, how big should those spaces be, like we're giving them that information. But they did a whole analysis with special ed, for example, to talk about what does special ed need in a building that has K through 2 versus, or pre-K through 2 versus 1 through 4, how are those different, what does that look like? How does AST fit into all this? And so they don't know that stuff, we're telling them that stuff. So if you left the engineers and architects to design a school based on what they thought, they would probably build something based on what they imagined education to look like. So it's going to be a partnership. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think I would love to know numbers, but as a board, I think we can make decisions before we ask for numbers. If you read the feasibility study, and we got a very short summary, here's the first question for the board. Do we think and do we believe we want to put grades 3 through 12 in the Leland Gray building? Now, because if the board's like off the table, well, there's no sense of pricing that. So we could make that decision based on the information we already have in 10 years worth of looking at things. And if this board's already saying like, that one, I don't care if it's the cheapest option, I don't care if it's the best option that they give us, we're just not going there. Well, then why have them price it? If we say, you know what, we did the feasibility study and I can't get behind either one of those because of some piece of information, data that we have, well then maybe the answer is we should task the Stevens and Associates or the administration with another educationally sound model, which might be put all of the elementary school kids in a different building, such as New Fame, and look at the same set of data with a consolidated elementary school and it is, in the high school. But if we're not willing to at least look at these options and go, I'm not willing to put that in front of the voters, or I am. Because if we're not, then it's an exercise in foolishness here. So I'm sure everybody's had a time to look at this, and I'm sure everybody has an opinion as to whether they're willing to put it in front of the voters or not. That would at least be a decision. We should do something.
That's a fair point. Is anybody willing to put 3 to 12?
I just want to mention that if I recall correctly, one of the challenges around the 312 in here was that this building was designed for elementary students, and there was going to be significant, that doesn't alter what you were just saying, but I want to make sure that if people are going to make that decision, that they remember, because this was a while ago that we had this conversation back in May, that those costs were going to be significant because this building wasn't built for that. So I'm not trying to say one way or the other what's right or wrong, but I would just say we're back in the place exactly where we were back in May when we said we couldn't decide which one was the right one, so we asked the administration or agreed to have the administration come back to us in August with some of those answers and suggestions that you're saying we need to be making now. We haven't had that part yet. We haven't heard that part yet. That's all I'm saying. And so we're here in this place back where we were in May. And I'm not sure I have the information enough to be able to say, let's price it out, or one model or the other, or both, unless I know that it's not going to be an exorbitant cost to price it out. I'm happy to do it otherwise if it's not, but there were basically two models. And to be fair, y'all will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think one of them included Newfane and Jamaica having pre-K and K, and one not, right? And so that's a totally different scenario, because it costs more here, but it also means we would be closing 2 buildings, and communities need to decide whether that's something they want to do too. So we need to decide whether we think that that's important to ask communities to do. I just want to make sure that we know what we're asking, before we spend money.
Right, and I think the option one accounts for that, the pre-K and K offsite, meaning Jamaica.
Right.
I don't think that's exactly, if I remember, I think it was more open-ended than just in one of those 2 schools. Especially because I remember a big conversation being driving times, and that another reason why Central is so great is because for someone, let's say on the far end of Jamaica, to transport someone to Newbrook is a significant driving time. I don't remember the exact number, but I believe upwards of 45 minutes.
Using minutes at the end.
Yeah, I'm just gonna quote what we said in the minutes. This is reading directly from the minutes on May 31st, I think it is, May whatever. The project is looking at the possibility of moving the district into Townsend Elementary School and Leland Gray buildings to create one campus model. And then number 1, pre-K and kindergarten would not be included in the one campus model. Number 2, Jamaica and Newbrook would maintain their pre-K and kindergarten programs. That's from the minutes.
So just an educational sidebar to that. So, and to get back to Drew's point earlier, I think option 2, the administration had a really hard time getting behind that for the reasons that were mentioned. Yeah. I think that's a terrible idea. In this building, you build a new building, you can put pre-K through 12 in it, and you can be designed for that purpose. It's a different animal. This is not that way. The challenge to option 1 that we struggled with was because you have to put 4 grades in Townsend, that forced pre-K and K offsite. It wasn't really a choice we made. We kind of forced it off. Mm-hmm. And the challenges around that is that there's different regulations between kindergarten. Kindergarten fits more with 1 than it does with pre-K. Mm-hmm. And so if you have pre-K and K in other sites, then the pre-K rules you have to follow are going to be in place, and the other public school rules are also going to be in place. So you're going to need to have like a dual system in place for those 2 schools that only have 2 grades in each. That's far less than ideal. K1 together makes a lot more sense. Now you can say, well, then do K3 in Townsend, but now you're kicking 4 over here and you're getting a lot closer to the bottom one. So it's like that, and that's the other reason educationally why I don't think as an administrative team, we felt like we could get behind that one either, because of that one part of it. It was cheaper, there's less addition required and that sort of thing, but it created this weird pre-K thing that isn't just something to talk about, it's a real challenge around the rules for pre-K and kindergarten. So I think people in Jamaica would love to have a pre-K up there. In Newbrook, it hasn't really been as big of a deal because of the numbers of privates that are located within range there. But I think adding one in Jamaica would benefit in some way. So I don't know. That was we. If you're going to ask like the administration, like which one we got behind, we didn't really get behind either one of them for those reasons. And there might have been other reasons too, but those are the ones that jumped out at us. Sorry. Wah, wah.
No.
But what Drew mentions earlier, this other idea of like having feasibility people come back and re-feasibility something else. I don't think that's a word, but I just used it. And look at another alternative might be something worth considering as well, where you're hybriding some of the things that we've already talked about to see what could be doable.
So right now, we're not providing equitable education across the district. One of our goals as a board is is to make sure that we're providing equitable education to all of our students. And it would be, I think, impossible for us to provide the same access to services to the students of Jamaica as we are the students of Townsend right now. Not because we don't want to, not because we're intentionally falling down on our mission, but because the size of the school, they probably don't have a nurse every day, do they?
Oh.
No.
Counselor?
They probably
share.
don't
Doesn't
get-
mean that we're not providing
Share.
education.
It's just,
You
it's
know,
prorated.
you know what?
We're able to-
At Townsend, does Townsend have a nurse available to them
That's
every day?
numbers.
We share our nurse, not very much. So we have Abby 4.5 days a week, and Jamaica, she goes up there for a half day for Jamaica,
So-
which is kind of silly in my
Yeah,
opinion,
but
because
is
what do you
that-
do in a half
Is that
day?
equitable access? Well, maybe by some mathematical, we also count students as 0.4s in our calculations, so maybe that is equitable. I don't see it that way. I don't, I think,
Parent wouldn't.
what's that?
A parent wouldn't.
It's certainly not
Good lawyer.
because in Jamaica, our teaching principal is also the nurse 4.5 days a week.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a nurse there. Well, in Townsend, 4.5 days a week, there is a nurse to do the nurse's job.
And a separate principal.
So I think that makes a difference. And I'm putting it out there because as we continue to, look at what's best for our kids, where we started this conversation, and those of us that were on I think it was 3 or 4 long-term planning committees previous to this, we spent, I don't know how many hours of our lives looking at those factors and how important those factors are to our students. And that's where we started, and that's how we got to, if we bring our students together onto a single campus, then every student has access to a nurse every day. Every student has the ability to have a larger cohort of students to work with. The teachers can band the grades together, professional development becomes easier, our programs will improve. I can go on and on and on about the hours and days of my life that we spend doing that. I don't think we should give up on that vision of bringing our students together in a way that gives them access to more services and provides additional efficiency for us. As we're moving resources between school buildings, we're losing valuable resources because that's part of their workday. When the person leaves from Newfane and drives to Jamaica to help provide counseling services, that's part of their workday where they're not engaged with students. That's lost productivity time. So there are efficiencies that we gain in our system by bringing it. And again, I sat way too many hours of my life looking at these details that were presented by our educational experts. And right now, we have 2 options that are on the table, and it sounds like we don't like those options. And we don't like those options necessarily because we are not comfortable putting 3rd graders in this building. Well, if we're not okay with that, that's great, but we shouldn't stop the conversation there, because I think the goal of equitable education for all of our students is something we should continue to work for. And the reason why I asked about where does the board, where's the board, straw poll, because if these are like a no-go for everybody in this room, well, then we should put that aside and come up with a different plan, and maybe asking Stevens and Associates to look at what does it look like to put elementary schools K through 5 in Newfane, and what's the cost of that? Maybe that's another option, because it achieves most of our goals. It's not a good option, it's not a bad option, but there's more benefits than negatives associated with it. But at least we would then have a motion, a movement. We move this plan forward.
Chris?
So, definitely agree with what Drew said. I mean, I love Townsend School, but I do think out of the 3 buildings, Newfane's probably your best choice for an elementary. But my question is I agree with the equitable education and the fact that they don't have a counselor every day, they don't have a nurse. But the difference with this district is those parents could actually choose to come to Townsend, go to Newfane, and they haven't made that choice. And I'm sure if they went and said, we want to go to Townsend, or there's room for them. So my question is, then what happens? And we know Townsend is gonna lose their minds. So then if we make that decision and these towns say, we are not voting to close these buildings, my question is, what happens then? Because, I mean, we know Townsend, they're gonna be angry if they get moved to Newfane. Look what happened with Laughter. And the people that are left in Jamaica, they had the choice. They could have left 3 years ago.
I don't think we can predict what the voters are gonna necessarily do. I think we should provide a plan, provide the information, make sure they're educated. We don't want them to make uneducated decisions. But if we do our job at educating the public and the public tells us no, then they've sent us back to the drawing board. And that's the work that they asked us to do. No different than we've tasked the administration. They bring it back to us and we're not happy with the information they gave us, so we're gonna task them with some more information. The public's gonna do the same thing to us. They do the same thing to us every year with our budget. If they're not happy with what we put out on the table for programs, they will vote down our budget. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't put a budget in front of them. But let's give them a plan. Let's tell them all the reasons why we believe it's the best of the bad options, I guess, and let them weigh in on it. They'll tell us. We'll know. We'll get yelled at.
So I just want to stand corrected that this is a new idea. We said earlier there haven't been any new ideas. What Drew is proposing is a new idea. Just wanted to say that. I didn't think it was possible, but nice job here.
Option 3.
Hallelujah.
The trick is to get a plan, get numbers, and then sell it.
I think the step is to make, as a board, to agree on the goals. Can we agree that like the educational benefits and the social emotional benefits that we're trying to achieve with most of these plans, some of them check more boxes than others, right? But like, we've done this work. I think maybe we need to be like, here's all the check marks. Which options gives me the most check marks? Let's look at that closer. We've done this an awful lot.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, she's absolutely right. We don't need to go back because we've already done that.
Right.
And I don't think, I mean, this board has changed, but not significantly enough to say that we're gonna change our mind about that. We've already decided that. We have 2 options on the table. And, you know, Drew, you mentioned that we don't want 3rd grade in here. That wasn't what the conversation was. The conversation was, we know the building isn't set up for 3rd grade or elementary grade, so it's going to cost more to do it. But that doesn't mean it's not something we want to do. We may very well want to do that, and that's how we find out when we price out something. What we did hear from the administration was the other model with pre-K, K was not an advisable option. And I take that very seriously, because to me, that sounds kind of like it's off the table unless we decide to change the scenario. And so at that point, after hearing that, I don't have to choose between the 2 because one feels to me like it's off the table. So there's one option here. And if we want to go out and get a price on that, I want to know how much that's going to cost us to get a rough price on that before we're willing to take it back. But
and just to the point about the younger kids being here, the design was about square footage.
Right.
It wasn't about
I understand
cohabitation.
that. I understand.
So I don't even know how you,
It was multiple additions.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so it didn't take
Yeah.
into account that how do you keep a level of separation between certain things. And so so yes, so there might be more than just additions to make that work with them in the same building. I don't know the answer to that. We never talked about that. We didn't go that far down the road. So
Interesting.
yeah.
What about
So Emily, in your mind, the only choice would be number 2 to flesh out.
No,
Right, just to
I don't,
flesh
that's
out.
not what I'm saying.
Oh,
What
I'm
I
sorry.
am saying is the first option doesn't sound feasible, so we'd have to change the configuration if we were gonna do something like that. Because pre-K and K don't work together.
Have we decided that everything's gonna be consolidated in Townsend?
That was the feasibility study, was one kid as well.
I think that's the problem, we decided on it.
But we did decide that. We
We decided, we haven't decided. Can I ask, the one campus model the ideal was Townsend because it's centrally located and because the middle high school is here.
Yeah.
But what the goal we were really trying to accomplish was the elementary grades in one building, right? That's really what we were talking about. If it could also be adjacent to the middle high school, then there's maybe some benefits to that too. Or am I misunderstanding that? That's really what you were trying to accomplish, or
It would be ideal.
as far as the educational benefits?
Take geography out of it, it doesn't matter.
Community matters, I think a lot of people will have a hard time arguing education is equitable if you're in your community or 20 miles from your community. I mean, I know I wasn't here for that, you've all decided it, but I don't wanna pretend that doesn't exist as part of
And that was why the center made more sense, because it kept everybody as close to home as possible. And that's where Newbrook, though it's a great site, as Peter pointed out, is 35-minute drive for students that are coming from Jamaica. So it's great for the Newbrook parents, terrible for the Jamaica parents. The reality is all parents are gonna end up in Townsend eventually.
Yes. Might be worth looking at how many students we will lose or we are losing because of location already. Is there a cohort in Jamaica that is sending out of district or to private schools, like a significant cohort? Are we gonna lose families that we're counting on coming to our schools if they're in their community? Are we gonna lose them if school is further or the opposite direction going forward? Maybe it's not a real consideration, I don't know.
Jamaica parents
But-
have been moving their kids out for years.
But it'd be nice to give our families a reason to stay in district, whether it's the one, whatever it is. Like I hear that where I live at the other end of the district, right? Folks are, when there's a ripple in the water, folks go out of district the other direction, and that's gonna happen to some degree, but I would love to give all of us a reason to bring our tuition dollars.
Which brings to mind the conversation that we originally had, which was really and eloquently about bang for your buck or perceived bang for your buck, so that the families, the taxpayers, the students feel like they are getting their money's worth. They feel like they are getting their time and effort being spent in a building's worth with what they are getting. How we achieve that, in part, is by providing a stronger education and a stronger social and emotional situation by combining students and grade as much as possible so that we gain all of the benefits that we just talked about a bunch. Hopefully that would create a really amazing experience. I think the goal is to create an amazing experience, right? That's the goal.
Noticing it's also 9:30 right now too.
Yeah.
So we still have more agenda items and an executive session.
All right, what is folks' pleasure on this? To go to Stevens?
The two just so I can reflect back what I've heard, the two things I've heard that are sort of next level conversations for short-term planning are, let's get some numbers on one of these options, right? What the additions would cost, all right? And the other thing I'm hearing is, do we want to expand the feasibility study to look at other buildings. Those are the two things I'm hearing. Two very different things and going two very different directions. But they're both holding true to the idea of one K5-ish, K4, whatever, some sort of similarly configured building that's singular.
We've been there and we said no. Right? Have we been there and we said no, we didn't want to do, a grade configuration in one school, a grade configuration in another, and make Jamaica kids having to go all the way to Newfane, and Newfane kids having to go all the way to Jamaica.
Well, the idea in that original proposal, early one, was that they made transition from one, they basically hopped through the whole district before they landed at Leon and Greg. And
They transitioned.
they kept transitioning. And that was something else that we spent a lot of time talking about is transition and disruption and learning through transition. So we were trying to limit the number of times they hopped.
Scotty had his hand up.
Scotty's going to
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it would be awesome for the board to come out and visit the buildings, just to have some firsthand information about what it's like in the buildings. And I know some of you are involved heavily as parents and as in other ways, but I think that I would love to take a tour of Newbrook with some of you and just show you around what it looks like to go to school there. And then you could have just that as just another data point. I also I'm a little worried about like some of the ideas we've had about having our K and maybe 1 or pre-K and K in a building just to keep it open. I don't think that was the intent of the agreement, the articles of agreement to begin with. And I think that if we're gonna like not utilize a building, we ought to be pretty straightforward about it and not utilize it.
Thanks, Scotty. Okay, folks. It's 9:30. Do we feel comfortable, or do we want to approach Stevens with one idea, a couple ideas? As Bob said, I'm also hearing a couple different things. Sounds like folks are not, well, we heard from you why both of these don't work. Be willing to hold our nose and present one to them for further study, fleshing it out.
I think until you know a dollar amount, and you can have Lori tell you what the implications of that are. That's probably good information to have, right?
Sounds like you're talking to get us a quote for the other project anyway.
Sprinklers.
Oh,
Remember the one we went over that one?
sounds like that was like 3 hours ago.
Yeah. So I guess my only other thought is just that I don't find it super useful to ask how much it costs to add X number of square footage. Because we know that that's not a solution that our administration can feel comfortable with. To just blindly add X number of square footage and dump students into it.
Well,
Right,
depends
you
which one
said-
you're talking about, but yeah, I
You
mean,
basically have said that you're not super comfortable with it being, that it's not that you're not comfortable with combining, it's that you need to know how that's going to flow. So it sounds to me like the question to ask Stevens is not strictly how much is it gonna cost to add X number of square footage, but with the stipulations that whatever it is that you have some layer of separation, et cetera.
in other words, how design a building within this building to be able to encompass 3 through 12 with the additional footprint that you need and flow changes or whatever else would
And
be
it
part
doesn't
of
need to
that.
be a design, right? We're not looking for a design
Well, that's how they
from
do it
them.
though. I mean, it's not a formal blueprint, but they do sketch this out, CAD and stuff, yeah.
But they're not gonna design, but we're not looking for a design. We're not looking for them, we're looking for schematic,
I'm not looking for blue.
bold ideas.
What does it look like?
Bold ideas.
What is it?
Like schematics even too technical of a term for what we're asking, honestly.
It's dollars per square foot amount.
It's more than dollars per square foot, but it is
For that.
we're not looking for the actual, I don't need to know exactly what it looks like. Real loose idea.
So if I hear, just again, reflect what I'm hearing, what you're saying is have them figure out how to make that option 2 work and what would the cost be? Is basically what I'm hearing you say.
I think that's what
That's what Lizzie's saying. And the only thing I'm gonna say to that, and I think that's a fine step to take, and you'll get information out of it. The political side of that is, and Scotty's comment notwithstanding, that option doesn't account for what you're doing with 2 other buildings, which would involve 2 different communities, 2 different votes saying the same thing in order to make that option happen. In addition to whatever the cost is you're gonna get back. So it isn't just a financial cost, there's a political side of it too. Just wanna make sure everyone's on the same page, that's what we're talking about. Because you're not pushing pre-K out and calling it open, right? Whether that's ethical or not, it's, you know what I'm saying. Okay. Well, is that your motion? I'm not facilitating this, I'm not the board chair. Right?
So expansion on option 2. Good.
Well, option 2 with intent, I guess, right?
Option. I like that.
Go ahead.
I don't want to do this, but it does occur to me that an option is, because of what Bob just said about the Newbrook and Jamaica schools. I don't want to make any assumptions about Jamaica, but I do know there was a plan, a proposal at some point to look at the SU to rent one of the facilities, which Newfane could fit that scenario. And we could talk about pre-K in one or both of those buildings, not pre-K, because that's the thing that he was saying, no, we can't combine those 2 grades educationally. But we could ask for it without including pre-K.
So you do a friendly amendment of.
I'm not even making a motion, or
Well,
I'm just
so what I'm
suggesting
hearing you
that's
say is
one
like a
option.
K3 Townsend 4-12 at Leland and Gregg with the potential of pre-K in those 2 locations and 1 used for central office.
I was covering my head when I was saying that, but
Well, I just want to make sure that's what I'm hearing.
it just trying to address your
Yeah, I
concern
hear you.
about if the school districts don't want to give up their school.
Say it again about pre-K either.
So it's sort of, yeah, it's 4-12 at Leland and Gregg, K3 in Townsend, with pre-K in Jamaica and Newbrook, and potentially Newbrook as serving also as.
Well, we had other options on the table for educational programs as well in the other.
Well, the immersion
buildings. I
center
mean,
was talked about. I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of other possibilities, but those are minimally what you'd be talking about.
What I'm saying is not eliminating the use of those 2 buildings. Now that changes the cost of education. Okay, just saying, we
Yep.
maintain those buildings as school buildings and it maintains the cost. If we're renting them out, that offsets the cost. But if we're not, then that's not saving us any money or much. I'm not advocating for this. I'm just saying
It's something to talk about though, right?
You know, a lot of businesses can co-locate with a preschool easily.
Well, one of the things we heard feedback throughout the years was that people don't want their littlest children to be living in their communities. I don't know whether that's still something that will hear, but I was.
And you can add after-school programming perhaps to those buildings too. I mean, there might be ways to kind of do some other stuff that would continue using it as a community-based center in some manner. So.
Newfane, just Newbrook doesn't operate pre-K. Just saying that right now.
Neither does Jamaica currently.
They you.
Yeah, so they would both take some.
So these are
more-
challenges.
Those are things you have to address to do that. Yep.
Because we have some loyalty to private ones in those districts. For a reason.
So if you ask Stevens how much it would cost, find out how much that would cost.
There we are.
Oh,
Wonder if
that's
Okay, we're at, we're at agenda 1, subsection D.
Yeah, we need to.
Cruise through some.
I am happy to let the chair decide whether we can he can financially, support whatever they're gonna give us for a cost to price it out. That's my biggest concern,
Yeah.
is it's gonna be a huge amount of money to ask for this from them. And if it is, I think we need to come back to the board. But if they're saying, look, we can do this pretty reasonably, and you can, I trust you to judge that.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Getting the price on
Is that a
a
motion?
one campus.
I'll second it.
Ooh, love that.
No, I didn't make that motion. 'Cause I'm not even sure what it said. Because I don't think we haven't charged, I mean, if we're gonna make a motion, we should charge you with a dollar amount or something, and I'm just saying.
Like not to exceed $2. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't make, feel free to though, to suggest.
So the feasibility study costs $25,000, correct?
Yeah.
Right? So this is kind of a bolt on to that. I've got a little knowledge of Stevens, so I can say that's probably gonna cost between $10,000 and $15,000. If we're comfortable with that, let me know. Does anybody wanna give me a not to exceed on this?
Can I start
Or are
with
we moving on?
cost and scope without a not to exceed before we kind of know where? I know it's another step, but like, what can they do for us might be the way in rather than. Sure.
I'll go ahead and make a motion not to exceed 10,000. How about that?
Okay.
Now I have a motion.
All right.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Hold on.
Aye. Too late.
Motion carries unanimously.
What are we studying?
That's up to Al.
That's up to Al.
You have not to exceed 10,000, that part I got.
We tasked the chair.
Well, the chair will tell me what to
Yep.
ask them about?
That's what you envision.
Great.
It's your,
Yeah. We tasked the chair.
it's pricing out the single campus model.
K through 3 at Townsend, right?
Yep.
And
Or
4
probably
through
the
12.
either you make or you choose.
Yeah.
And potentially looking at WCSU at home
So your option two.
You're on it.
I was
Wait.
option two. I think we should just do option two.
Quick, put that paper on the
Price on
table.
everything. Forget about the pre-K for
I think
just do option
I
two.
think that's it. We did.
Yes. I don't think it's gonna be.
I'm with you.
Second with option two.
Okay.
To do cheaper.
We read those.
Gotcha.
All right. NEASC update.
All right, so this one will be much quicker. You guys had authorized us to get into a district accreditation process with NEASC as part of the analysis of our programming. We have been working since last winter, fill out an application we've been accepted for our,
I would say you
that was awesome. We've been accepted for our initial
Why does it sound on camera?
candidacy visit. We have a steering committee, which is co-chaired by 2 teachers, one elementary, one secondary. There are elementary and secondary administrators, elementary and secondary support staff, and central office staff on the steering committee. So you have a steering committee. We're setting up now an opportunity for the NEASC rep to come and present on the process, and that's where we are. So made some good progress since the spring. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right. I think everybody's probably read the principal reports and the superintendent reports. Apologize to the folks that.
I just want to add one thing, just to the super's report, that there's a letter going out to families either tonight or maybe early in the morning describing our new response to active threats.
I've gotten it.
You've already got it, okay. It's the Run, Hide, Fight protocol, which is an options-based response. And we're gonna be training staff who will work with kids. The secondary level will involve the kids in the conversations. The elementary levels will be like, do that, and the teachers will direct it. We're not gonna get into conversations with the elementary kids about it. but it will be option space. They run. If they can't run, they hide. If they can't hide, they fight. So anyways, it's all recommended by the state and Margolis Healy, which is the security consultants that the state works with. And so that's what we're doing, and it's pursuant to the policy you guys adopted over the summer. But the letter's going out, people will hear about it, just so you guys know.
All right. And did Greg have anything besides the sprinkler? Yeah,
He's
yeah,
there.
yeah.
He's a brave man.
Okay, check that.
Greg, did you have a couple minute presentation?
Yeah, real quick. Some good news for you. If Renee would be willing to throw it up for y'all, I'm still not doing a great. Yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks, Renee.
Sorry, my computer might die. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's not
that's all mine
expecting
too,
me here. Should have had my charger.
So I've started to try to get to some before and afters. I might have more afters than befores. I just threw this together to try to have some pictures. So Renee, if you just go to the next one, this is just some of the projects we got done this summer. It was a really, really good summer for the West River schools. We got both of the sheds down on the fields painted. I wanted to protect the investment that was made on that big net shed before I started, but you can see it was starting to gray out. And actually, Billy from Townsend was able to carve out time to come over and help out and do this. So it was a really nice picture this summer of a lot of our people helping one another out in all the districts. It was really cool. If you want to jump to the next one, I think it's the kitchen project. This was kind of the befores when we had first just started tearing it up. And then there's some kind of in the midway, I think. Renee, if you go to the next one, was when the floor is up and I had painted the walls. And then the last couple are the finished product. I don't know. Yeah, so I thought it came out really good. It looks, the kids gotten great response from the kids. They've been really excited. We put in like a bar top area. We built walls between the service area and the students before they kind of just always used the edge of the equipment that was there. And there were some some power poles that they used for power that we were able to take out and run through the floor. Really excited. There's, if you go back one, I think it is, Renee. Yeah, you'll see where the seating is here. There's actually bench seating that's going to go all the way around. One of the benches showed up the other day. I'm expecting the last piece of it here real quick. It really has come out great. The kids have absolutely loved it. I know Jake and the kitchen staff have really loved it. It was a really long project to take on while also dealing with that summer food program that we ran this summer, which was a smashing success, and I applaud Jake for the work that he did on it. But goodness, it made my project a lot harder having him in there all the time. And then, yeah, you can see the next one here, I think, or the one after Renee, is the tennis courts are finished, and the basketball courts, they got in there mid-July, and I think it was into like the first week of August. Those guys finally came through for us. They did a great job. They were really, really solid guys to deal with. And then I think the next one, Renee, these are the projects that were done this summer that I didn't get photos of. So the fire alarm project and with the lockdown button and system at Townsend, really excited for them to have that going. There's a little bit of door work to do. The deck, the posts and stairs were replaced on Townsend, and there's a hallway and one classroom was painted, which Billy got to that. Billy got eaten up there in a lot of his August with just kind of cleaning up after the electricians when they were just kept chipping away, and it kept forcing him to go backwards in his work. Down at Newbrook, we had 2 classrooms down there that were painted and got new flooring, and they were asbestos classrooms, so they were, we had to have Catamount come in and remove the asbestos. Really getting anything done at Newbrook in the summer is a challenge with summer learning down there. They ran summer learning until August 6th. And then there were 11 days, I think it was 9 days, right? 10 or I don't remember. But there was a handful of days there, barely 2 weeks, where before we had new teacher induction in there. So again, Leland and Gray was able to free up a few guys, and they sent them down to help out Pat, and they were able to help him out with some of his stripping and refinishing of some of his hard floors. Newbrook received 2 inches of new blacktop with traffic lines painted in there. The split rail fence out front was replaced. And at the back door, we added another push button system so that when kids get sent in to say use the restroom or whatever during recess, they can just press the button, and from the office, they're able to allow those kids to get in. Jamaica had one of the classrooms were painted there, and they got a new UV water system put in. Their system failed last year just before school ended. And then our grounds guy was able to get up in that kind of that middle area there where it kind of used in by the kitchen and whatnot. And he cleared a lot of the stuff out of there, which was really nice. And I think he's going to be removing some trees as well. Leland and Gray additionally had the hot water repiping project. We were able to get that finished where we put in a new heat exchanger to tie into the boilers. It's all under the control system now. They had 3 classrooms painted. They did ceilings, replaced the ceilings, painted the rooms, and new flooring in 3 rooms. And I actually think there were a couple of other rooms painted. And we actually spent a little bit of money with Alexa Litchfield to do some painting this summer. And she is also the one, if you haven't seen it, you need to. The wood chip shed, she did that on the front of that. Just phenomenal. She blew away any expectation and idea that I ever had for what that would look like. So that isn't even on here and was done. We obviously replaced the asphalt from Route 30 all the way down to the gate down on D level. And we were able to get that lined as well. And Dutton Gymnasium received a new deck boards, paint on the stairwells. The handrails were painted. So excited about all those projects. It was a lot of work. The guys really get after it, and I'm thankful to be with that crew. Go ahead, Renee, to the next one there. Yep. And so these are some of the things still coming. Is Townsend is getting a little bit of paved walk, emergency exit. Newbrook is getting their rear entry paved, and Townsend, I believe it started today. Their boiler, they had a crack in the plate of the boiler in the spring, and the piece and parts for that finally came in. Renee just died on me, did she? That's all right. And then there's a couple more still pending, but I just wanted to share that with you all. You should really be proud of the people that you employ in these schools and the work that they've done this summer. It was really great. It was a good summer. So.
Greg, it was amazing. Yeah, unbelievable. You guys, I mean, I don't know what you did on Fridays, but yeah, the rest of the week, no. Unbelievable. Incredible. Thank you. Are you gone now too? Sorry, I thought we lost you.
No, I'm not gone yet.
Okay. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, public comments. We have none. They are gone.
This is a secret right here. You just gotta wait until
Executive session next meeting.
Right. What was the best option for you?
Either one is fine for me. So the next scheduled meeting is on Indigenous Peoples Day, and which is a holiday for us here at the school. So I was going to propose either you move it to that Tuesday or you kick it to the following Monday. Whichever you prefer, those would be probably the 2 most logical options. If you kick it to the following Monday, I may be a little bit late to it on Zoom because I'll be at the River Valleys meeting, which starts at 6. So.
Okay. Does the 10th not work for? 10th would be the best option. Then?
Would be the day after Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's getting late. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, 10th it is. Okay, and for the executive session, this is getting good.
It's not gonna be long.
Okay, all right,
Do we need to take any action?
There's no action coming out of the backside.
okay. Information. All right. I will make motions then. I move to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage for 1 BSA 3131F.
Ask that first, yeah.
What's that?
You need to
Yeah.
vote on that first.
Okay.
Second.
First motion. Thank you, Peter. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. I motion enter an executive session for confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body.
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And who do you want in the meeting, in the executive session with the board? Presumably me, but
Yeah. I would say,
you don't need the principals.
no, probably just you.
This guy's waving bye-bye.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll do that in executive session. Danielle, I don't know how y'all do this.
Okay, we're back out of executive session and there is no action to be taken. So I will entertain the final motion.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, that was a long one.
But,